There we go, sorry. Roll call?
Chairperson Carpenter?
Here.
Chairperson Carpenter?
I'm here.
Vice Chair Johnson?
Here.
Member Lambertini?
Here.
Member Leo?
Here.
Member Lugo?
Here.
Member Martinez is excused.
Now we have opened up for public comments. Do we have any public comments? We do not have any public comments. I guess we go into the consent calendar. And
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second it.
all righty. And I guess we move on to the business calendar items.
Did you want to take a vote on the consent calendar? So a motion and a second.
Sure. Let's take a vote on the consent calendar. Can we get a motion in a second?
You have the motion and the second.
Okay.
And so you just need to, you can just,
I'll say
yeah.
yes.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, then I suppose we move on to the business calendar items. Is that correct?
Good evening, committee members. I'd like to introduce you to the city's independent auditors, White Nelson Deal Evans, and here tonight is Nitin Patel, partner with White Nelson Deal Evans, and also Cassie Rademacher, also a partner with White Nelson Deal Evans. They've been an auditor for about this is, I believe, our fourth fiscal year or audit. So they were also engaged to perform the agreed upon procedures or AUP report on Measure X for fiscal year 18-19, and they'll be presenting their results or findings and a brief presentation as well. Without further ado.
Okay. Good evening. Nitin Patel. I'm a partner with White Nelson Deal Evans, and I'm here to make a short presentation of the Measure X results for June 30th, 2019. First, just to give you some background, we are a large regional firm that is in Irvine, and we specialize in audits of governmental entities. We are currently the financial statement auditors for the city for the year ended June 30th, 2019. The scope of our engagement was to look at management's assertions regarding compliance with Measure X. In that process, we agreed the revenues and usage/expenditures identified by management to source documents. The total Measure X revenues as detailed in our report and schedule are $15.2 million, and the total Measure X uses expenditures as detailed in the schedule are $15.9 million. The results. Our examination does not provide a legal determination of the city's compliance with the specified requirements. In our opinion, management's assertion that the accompanying schedule for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2019 is accurate, that the city's uses expenditures of Measure X funds complied with the requirements of Measure X is fairly stated in all material respects. And that concludes my presentation, and I believe you have the report attached with your items. Thank you, and I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Anybody on the committee have any questions?
I do. Hi, good evening. Have you done these types of procedures for other municipalities with regards to their sales tax, possible sales tax increases? Are we seeing more and more of this, is this a similar type AUP that you're doing on for other municipalities?
Yes, we have done this at other municipalities. There are different types of services that they will request, but this is the management's assertion report. We have done that at other clients of ours, and this is a more recent development because it seems like all the cities are passing this, and so I think this year we've had to do a few where they just recently passed the tax. But each entity will, it depends on, how they structure the engagement.
What are the actual procedures that you're performing, since you're essentially just looking at the management's assertions of where, especially specifically more so on the expenditure side?
Yeah, we look at the source documentation, and so the information in there, there's some components which included looking at the budget, and that those numbers are actually shown in the budget. We also looked at the compensation increases, so that there are different components. So we looked at actual checks that were written, we actually looked at payroll registers, and then we established a time period. So we actually looked at all of those source documents to determine that the numbers were supported.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just had a couple. So when I read your notes here in revenue and use and expenditures, we've had a lot of discussion here about a structural deficit, and you reference an operating deficit for fiscal year 2018, 2019 would have been 10.2 million. Now, when you do the next audit, will you compare that with the 2018, 2019 budget? And will you still probably identify, but for Measure X, there'll still be a operating deficit? Or will Measure X just be tossed in as general fund revenue and function as revenue? Will it be, so when you analyze it, will it be separate?
I think each year is separate, but I believe that, I think the question you're asking is, will this always be a component of Measure X? I think that's the question you're asking.
Yeah, because until the city council addresses that underlying 10.2 million deficit, it will always be there, but for Measure X.
Right, so we're not doing 1920, but I would say
Right, I
that
understand.
would be a fair statement to make.
Okay.
That would be correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a follow-up question. Have you begun to have discussions about how the future AUPs will be designed to be able to provide useful information?
No, we have not had any of those discussions, because again, these are management's assertion, and so I know that the 1920 information is in there. We have not had any discussions related to that. That's why I was a little careful in answering the question.
And I'm trying to think about what would actually cause an inability to say that management's assertions are not appropriate, and it's based upon the procedures that I imagine that your firm performed. And I'm struggling, since essentially you're just taking the you're taking management's assertion, which we know that this is all general fund money, and you're not able to make a legal opinion about whether the procedures you're performing are meeting the requirement in the ordinance. And I mean, I've been in your spot before. I'm also a CPA, so I'm trying to imagine what in what instance you would be looking at this and saying, okay, out of this 15 million, we don't think that 10.2 is an appropriate. We don't agree with management's assertion of the use of this money, and I'm struggling to where, and I'm not going to expect you to answer this, because I'm not sure if there's a specific question in it, but I think that overall that's what kind of this committee's struggle, I think, with the the audit on the expenditure side, since this is all one bucket of money with general fund, and I think it's going to continue to put our finance department in a very difficult. This is the easiest year to really look at this, and it's going to get more and more difficult as we go forward. And I'm just struggling to put the value on what this is actually telling us, because essentially I can't imagine that there's really much instance to where you would say, no, I don't think that we agree with management's assertions about this money, because the money was spent. 5 times the amount of this money was spent in the general fund. So
If I may address that, one of the things, we've, as staff, we've been talking about what that 1920 audit might look like and how it might go. So, we have a public record. Let's just take an example for fiscal year 1920. We have a public record that says that we added, either 2 or 3, I can't remember now, but maintenance workers to the COLT team for homeless cleanup services. So that budget was adopted on June 18th. And so I would think that when we go through this with the auditors next year, that it would be incumbent upon us to first show them the public record that says that the city council intended this, and then 2, show maintenance workers who work on the COLT team, who are coded to the COLT team, that were hired after June 18th, presumably after July 1st, and then show the actual compensation paid for them for the fiscal year. And so one of the things that we were discussing is, for example, let's just say that those were, I'm just going to round down for ease. Let's say it was 2 maintenance workers at $50,000 each. Well, maybe one of them gets hired on October 1st and one of them gets hired on November 1st. Then we know that we're not going to spend $100,000, $50,000 each on those workers. And so we're going to be giving them our actual expenditures. We can identify these are the 2 people that were added to the COLT team, and then here's what the actual expenditures were for them. And so, I think in each case, we're going to have to try to make the case, make the argument for the auditors to be able to demonstrate that we did follow what the city council intended for the Measurex money. It's the best I can offer right now.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I think it's, again, this is these first years are the easiest years to do. As we go along, it gets more and more convoluted to where you're not able to look at it and say, well, what would have 8 years ago, we came into this Measurex funds, and what's happened since then, and it gets more and more convoluted. And I appreciate your point on the on identifying particular personnel and those types of items. Unfortunately, as you know, the biggest bucket of this is not really identified because it's money that would have had to have been cut that you're not having to cut that. And that's the biggest part of this bucket, and it's also going to be the most difficult to be able to say, okay, well, we saved these 5 workers from Parks and Rec, and we saved a worker in finance. We said a person, and it's going to be this is the easiest year, and it's still very imprecise science behind this, and I continue to be concerned about the value that, and again, I've been in your spot, and so I don't, and so that, what is the value of us of the work that's being done? Because essentially you're looking at and saying, did this money get spent? Yes, this amount of money got spent, as well as 5 times this amount of money in the rest of the general fund, of which is part of your overall city audit. So it's just I think it puts your department, Catherine, in a very difficult spot, but it also shows that probably one of the most important parts of this whole process is probably what we're going to talk about later in terms of the report that you give to council is probably even more important, because then you're able to White Nelson will be able to look at it and say, okay, well, this is what this is where they said the money was going to go. I would imagine you might structure some procedures to where this is where they said the money was going to go, and is that did that money go there, or now they tweak that, and they it gives a little bit of a backbone to where you can go. But so, all right, no question, but thanks for the explanation.
Actually, now that you brought it up, I want to ask you a question, not of the auditors, even though it does reference auditor. So it says there was a $10.2 million operating deficit, but we got additional. When was the internet sales tax money banked 2018, 2019, and then there was additional property tax revenue, right? So even with those additional, I think it was like $6 million approximately, the deficit. So the deficit could have been 16.2. Or did the money come in later, or am I missing things? Because we discussed the internet sales tax, I don't remember when the ruling was. I don't know if you banked that 2018, 2019, or 2019, or the current budget. And then property tax revenue, does that come in mid-fiscal year, or does it come in at the beginning of the fiscal year? Because, right, we talked about the city got 5 million additional property tax revenue.
Right.
And we got lucky and won the lawsuit, and the internet sales tax money comes. So is that, well, even though they're saying 10.2 million, the deficit would have been 16.2? But for Measure X and these other two revenue streams?
Well, that is one way to look at it. I think, yeah, as Member Johnson or Vice Chair Johnson has said, it is very difficult to put your finger on it.
Sure.
Another way to look at it is, okay, that deficit would have actually been less because we got the additional revenue.
Right.
But then because we got the additional revenue, council made additional appropriations.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure, as I put it together, we had a good year this year revenue-wise, right?
Right.
Council decided to spend it, and so the question is, I appreciate the auditor saying, based upon what the budget was, and based upon Measure X, the deficit, the operating deficit was $10.2 million, but for. But we got lucky, right? We got additional $6 million came out of the sky, and it came into Santa Ana. We may not have that next year.
Right.
Right, so I'm just trying to, we got lucky, a couple things, maybe next year we lose a couple lawsuits and then we gotta write some checks, I mean, kinda goes that way, so. All right, I appreciate it, thank you.
Any additional questions?
I have one more. Catherine, why is it the difference between the 15.8 versus 15.1? So expenditures exceeding revenue. I mean, is there a plain language narrative that you can provide for that?
It's just simply the expenditures that we identified were more than the revenue that was brought in. Again, it's all one bucket in the general fund. So, I mean, I guess I could have identified expenditures up to the point of the revenue and then just stopped, because like what you and I talked about earlier, the, what is it, 183,000 was paid out for vehicle incentive program rebates, and that wasn't included in the expenditures. So, I mean, that's another question. Do I report out revenue or report out expenditures that were planned for that money until I get to the revenue point and then stop so that they equal? Or do I just keep going? That's a good question.
We had talked on the vehicle incentive program, and so I think that the annualized amount would be 400,000 and change for 450 or so.
Actually, 1.7 million.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry. The de-annualized, the quarterly amount. So is the 183? Is that the actual cash expenditure as opposed to the accrued amount, or is our vehicle? Is the sale of vehicles lower than we were maybe possibly expecting?
The approximately 180,000 is accrued. So we pay them after we receive the documentation. So is that post June 30th? But it's related to April through June period.
So would it be a correct assumption to say that the number of vehicles that were sold from the participating dealers were significantly lower? I mean, more than half? Than was maybe expected.
And I'm not sure that that's quite a fair correlation to make, because how we set that $1.7 million estimate was we took the average car price that is sold in Santa Ana and the identified number of residents and multiplied and got the 1.7, or identified number of residents that bought cars in Santa Ana the previous year. And we multiplied and got the 1.7. But one thing that would cause the actuals to be less than that 1.7 is perhaps the Santa Ana residents aren't buying vehicles with an average price of $33,000 each. Maybe they're buying vehicles with an average price of $25,000 each. And when we made our estimate, we shot too high, taking the overall average. You see what I'm saying? So there's, that was how we took our estimate, and it was the best that we could do at the time. But there are certainly multiple ways to how you could get to less without saying that it's just like, oh no, the dealerships are selling way less cars than what they thought, and thinking that now that's going to drive a greater problem somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, and it could also be seasonality, in terms of more cars are generally sold in the fourth quarter than they are in this would be second quarter of the calendar year, and so on and so forth. I would say that I think it would probably be most appropriate in the future to be able to line item out the vehicle incentive rebates that are paid out, because of any of the expenditures that the city incurs. That's probably the one that we could point to as absolutely correlated. Without Measure X increase, we would not have 100%. We would definitely not have that rebate. So in the future, I would say that obviously 180,000, even though to most of us that's a material amount, but for the city that's not a material amount, I would imagine. But maybe in the future on this to be able to line item that out, especially because I think the residents probably would be they'd be interested to know how much we're rebating. And I think I'm done.
Any further questions? Nope. I suppose we can move on to Parks and Recreation and Community Services.
Okay.
Use of Measure X revenue.
Thank you.
Good evening. Lisa Ridloff, Parks, Recreation, Community Services Agency Executive Director. And in the audience, we have Jeannie Gerardo. She is our Recreation and Community Services Manager. And thank you for allowing me to be here this evening to talk about some of our Measure X funding that we currently have, and some of our future needs for Parks and Recreation. Parks and Recreation, I've been here 14 months and has had some challenges in the past, and a lot of funding has been removed from the, recession and things of that nature. And the library department was incorporated into the recreation department, and so programs and services have been suffering. And so just to give you a little perspective, the Parks and Recreation Department, we have 45 parks, soon to be 47 parks. We have 2 senior centers. We have 8 community centers. We have 1 tennis center, and we have operations of the Santa Ana Zoo. The library was actually moved to be its own department, which is a good thing. They're about to hire a director at the next council meeting next week. And so they'll be able to focus on those programs and services to the community, the library, and give it the attention that it needs. So our Measure X funding, as you see up on the screen, a little over $2 million is for improving really our contracts for landscaping, tree trimming, custodial, ball diamonds, things of that nature. So the community will see a significant difference in about February. We're going to be hiring these contractors in our parks. They're going to be mowed once a week. They're going to be fertilized. The sprinklers are going to be fixed. The garbage is going to be picked up. These are just basic amenities and necessities I think that the community deserves. So we're looking forward to that, and that's what this money has helped us, is going to help us do. Also, we have a list of deferred maintenance repairs, and so some of this money will also be used for that. The 12 positions for the park staff, the 11 positions, actually it's 12, that's a mistake. Sorry, I had to hurry up and get this PowerPoint done. But we have 12 positions, which includes park inspectors, general maintenance workers, a supervisor. So now we can have inspectors go out and inspect the contracts because they're pay-for-performance contracts. They can inspect the playgrounds because that's required, and we're not doing that right now. And we have general maintenance workers that can do in-house things and get things fixed quicker. So we're very happy those folks are coming on board. We're just finishing the interview process, and hopefully they'll be starting after the first of the year. Also, we have $442,000 for, it says tree replacement and supplies, and a little bit of the deferred maintenance. We've removed quite a bit of trees. They haven't been trimmed in a really long time. They're dangerous. And so what we're doing is having assessments done of the health of the trees. If they need to be removed, we remove them, and then we'll need to replace them also. The over $745,000 for the 2 full-time positions at the zoo, and a significant number of part-time people in the Recreation and Community Services Division to provide programs and services to the community, operate the community centers, things of that nature. The $343,000, which is the zoo contracts, again, there were a lot of deferred maintenance items. There's increased supply for the food for the animals, and so this will help fund that appropriately. And then lastly, there was $194,800 for 2 librarians. There we go. The next slide is some of the future needs. We have park security that deployed on September 20th with Allied Universal Security. And so they patrol our park 7 days a week. They're an observe and report, and they just help augment the police department. Although this is not Measurex funded, we hope that this continues to be funded to help us out in monitoring our parks and facilities. There's a lot of activity that goes on in the parks, some not so good. We've created a dashboard on the city's website if you want to check that out. Every month we'll report out what they've found and what has been reported. As they go through the parks, they'll use the My Santa Ana app if they notice a maintenance item or things that need to be fixed, so they'll add that to that. So park security, that's about almost $700,000 a year. And there are 7 park patrol officers. One of those is a supervisor. 2 are in the morning. We have them split the city, and then starting at 3 o'clock to midnight is the rest, and they split up the city in 4s.
Is that a contracted service, or is that SEIU?
Contracted service, yeah. The next item is a parks master plan. The city of Santa Ana we do not have a parks master plan, and this is really a comprehensive look at our entire system. And we really need to identify opportunities and engage the community to build, enhance, rehabilitate, maintain, and activate our parks. And so this is a really extensive process that we need to hopefully start up next year. It takes about 8 months to a year to complete. At the last city council meeting, it was mentioned that a couple of the council members wanted a dog park. And so if we had a master plan, it would identify the dog parks and areas that might be in the community that when money comes about or there are grants, you have like this shovel-ready or document that you can utilize to apply for grants. So we're looking forward to hopefully starting that process next year. And then the next one is park and facility amenity replacements. It's everything in the parks that the community utilizes. The restrooms, I think, are the worst. We have 26 restrooms. About 19 of those need to be replaced. There's prostitution, there's drug dealing, there's some not good stuff going on in those restrooms. They need to be removed and replaced with better facilities that will help the police monitor them in our park security. Also, our playgrounds, some of the playground equipment needs to be replaced, as well as the infill to make it safe for kids. So if they fall, it's on the resilient surfacing or some type of I think we have a lot of sand in our playgrounds, but those need to be updated. We need picnic tables, benches, drinking fountains, bleachers, backstop, outdoor exercise equipment, synthetic sports fields, shade structures, safe walkways. There's a lot of walkways that are buckled, even at the senior centers, and people are tripping, and those are lawsuits. And so we need to get those fixed, as well as our parking lots and our sports and security lighting. And something we've done this year is we've turned on our security lighting that we have operating at all the parks. So it makes it a little more safer, and the neighborhood appreciates that. So, but some of it's a little shoddy. It needs to be replaced and upgraded. And then the staffing to accommodate our increased programs and services eventually. We have to have staff to man the community centers, the programs and services. And Jeannie and her staff do a great job. They're minimal. We use a lot of part-time folks. We use volunteers. But at some point, we need to have full-time staff operating our facilities to make it safe.
Real quick question. So the
Yes.
zoo staff and part-time recreation staff does not cover that?
That's just partial. That doesn't cover it all. That's just
So you need additional staff? in your-
additional staffing, yeah, full-time staffing. Something the Human Resources Department wants us to make sure that we have full-time staff, for example, operating a community center. So the part-time folks there have a supervisor to supervise them because they're there by themselves. And so that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Quick question on your park security. You said they're just observe and report, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
So then that puts a burden back onto the police department?
Yes, if they cannot handle something, then they call the police department, and they come out and they help them. They don't have any kind of weapons or pepper spray or anything like that. They get out of their cars, they will walk the park and try to, entice people, loiterers, to get out of the park. But sometimes the gig is up. They know the security is there, and that when they leave, they'll just come back to the park. So it's just an extra set of eyes on the park. But yeah, they can't arrest anybody.
Okay, that's my next question. No power of arrest either then?
No,
Okay.
no. And I think the police department was trying to hire park rangers. And so they were having difficulty in doing that. So this is kind of the, in the meantime, get some park security, park patrol out there to help out, so.
Would the park ranger be considered a peace officer then?
Yes, they would have.
So they would fall under the
Yes.
auspices of the police department, which
Yes.
increases their budget even more?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
okay. And that's all I have, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I actually have several.
Mm-hmm.
So my first question is, what was the park budget before the Great Recession? And the reason I ask, I'll put it into context for you.
Right,
Massive cutbacks in every department,
yes.
except for possibly law enforcement. Law enforcement was here 2 meetings ago, said we don't really know what we need to be fully staffed and what our budget is, which kind of flabbergasted me. Kind of like you don't know what response times will be if you're fully funded and you're fully staffed.
Right,
So we've just gone through the longest economic boom in a long time.
yeah.
And for them to starve the Parks and Recs department is ridiculous. In addition to that, what's even worse about that is that, if I understand it correctly, we live off of grants for the park.
Yes.
You guys live off of grants, which is no different, unfortunately, than Public Works.
Yeah,
It is a pattern. It's a pattern with how the city functions, which I think many of you came from other cities. They don't function that way. It's sad. And so what I'm trying to get at is, what was your budget pre-Great Recession? Because we got to get you back to that level first.
right,
Then we can add additional money to the Parks and Recs.
Right.
Because we are talking about quality of life for the residents of Santa Ana. That's what we're talking about. And the citizens up here were put here to do that, to try to help that, not watch it get spent on things that outside of fixing the structural deficit.
right.
That's my first question. So when you get a chance, get us the full budget.
Sure.
So when we make our recommendations to council, it's like, well, the pre-Great Recession budget was X. You've gutted it, lived
Yeah.
off of other people's grants, and never really went back to. We're 10 years. Well, I'd say 8 years from the Great Recession.
Right,
What did you put in extra? What they did was, what it appears is they starved Parks and Recs and starved Public Works and said, go get your own money. Well, then what's the purpose? The second question I had is, which is actually, it's more complicated, but I think when you do the master plan, it's something we need to figure out.
Yep.
I've been in this city 25 years, some of the folks on here longer than me. The school district, their playgrounds and their fields are not part of the Parks and Recs department, but we use them like Parks and Recs. And so we have to figure out a good relationship between the school district and the city council to figure out how we can, you guys try to maximize the best you can. You walk into warfare between soccer clubs and soccer leagues all the time. But that's how this city functions, because we don't have enough space. I get that. So we have to figure out, okay, if they give you access to a field, what is the city's piece? We can't expect the school district to pay for everything, just like when the city says you can use our fields, well, by the way, you got to pay, like when you want to use Eddie West Field, that's a city field.
Right.
How much does Mater Day or somebody else pay? So we have to figure that out, because to me, in many of these neighborhoods, the only thing that exists is the school. And how we do that is essential. And we would like to, or at least I would figure out how we can set aside money or start to direct money to solve that bigger problem. Because then you say you're adding 2 parks, 47. If we add every school, what are we at? The parks, we added maybe another 25 parks, basically. But we take care of them. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. So where you're at with school district would help.
Yep.
Because soccer leagues just move around.
Right.
Little league fields, we got a few, And so I'm trying to figure out, when I look at Parks and Recs, just like we did with Public Works, just like we did with Public Safety, what is your budget? Well, I need to know pre-recession, because that's normally we get to start first, Parks and Recs. We need to know what you get in grants that make up your budget. And then if you were to have an optimal budget, what would that be? Because the voters, as Tim likes to say, city won the lottery. And now we have to budget appropriately for big buckets. Public safety is 1, Public Works is 2,
Right.
Parks and Recs is 3. We have to figure that out. And we're one of the few voices that get to tell the city council, hey, maybe you should spend it this way instead of that way. So those are my 2 big questions. Pre-recession budget, and Santa Ana Unified School District, I believe we have access to most of the schools, right? You have access
Yeah,
to
we
most of
have
the
a
schools.
joint use agreement, and
Right, and how much do they put up? I mean, and we put up, but it goes both ways. We have city parks that they have some of their school stuff on. It goes
Right,
both ways.
right. For example, like Roosevelt Walker Community Center, there are 3 rooms that the school utilizes for school, and then they
Right.
use our parking lot, and then.
Right, and so
So-
when I see parking lots up there, it's like, wait a second, well, the parking lot half the time is used by the school district. Well, you're asking for a bond measure to pass, so that's, in an urban area, we got to function together in some shape or fashion. So those are my two big things.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any plan to buy additional land? Because I know we have a deficit on parks, land-wise.
Not that I'm aware of right now.
Why?
If we can find some. When we do our Parks Master Plan, it's going to identify opportunities, and so those will be some of the results of that. So it's really going to comprehensively look at the entire city and give us some type of roadmap or plan that we can look to and have data actually available to talk about our programs and facilities, our parks and amenities, and they actually rate all of our amenities in our parks. Make sure we figure out how many acres are really ours, how much is the school district's, and how do we utilize those properties. So,
Like Centennial Park,
right,
where it's all divvied up and
Right.
federal land, state land, county land.
yes, correct.
Lisa, I have a question. I'm sorry. I was told a little while ago that those green belts that are along Bristol are considered parks by the city. Is that true? I don't know, but I'd like to.
Jeannie Gerardo is nodding her head no, but can you, okay.
Just green space.
Yeah, I don't-
Is it on? I'm not, hello?
hello?
I am nodding my head no because As far as I've been here since 1994, I know there has been talk, I don't know how long ago, but no one has directed us to use it as a park. In my personal opinion, that would be not adequate. Could you imagine a ball going on Bristol Street? And those are my thoughts. But no one has directed us to use it as a park.
Are you talking about the green areas on the sides?
Yes, on the side.
Yeah, yeah, those,
I mean, I would consider it more of like the
A
trail that
pocket
we have
park.
underneath the power lines and that kind of stuff. You know, it's not a park, it's a bike trail, whatever it is.
Right,
Not a park.
right, they can be linear, walking, biking,
Oh,
sorry.
walking park, linear park, the
Yes.
green space in Bristol.
yeah,
Not park.
a lot of cities refer to that as just simply open space. So sometimes they even refer to as parks and open space.
Well, not surprising, I have a few questions. A couple other just, factual type things, but, so on the $2 million of parks maintenance and repairs, and you had indicated that those are for, you'll have some people coming in, mid-year, February, and so is this $2 million, is that an annual need, or is that a de-annualized amount, so meaning that it really to keep up with what we need next fiscal year, it's actually going to be $3 million, $4 million.
That's a great question. We went out with an RFP, and it is $2 million more. We can make it through this year, but we're going to need $2 million more just to have an adequate care of our parks and facilities to honor those contracts.
for the current fiscal year.
No.
So the
current-
1920.
The 1920, we have enough money in our Parks and Recreation to award the contracts in February and work through the end of the fiscal year.
So 4 months.
Yes, but starting the new fiscal year, we're going to need, $2 million for those contracts.
But that math,
More.
I'm confused on the math, because so if we need $2 million to go from February to June, now,
I'm sorry.
maybe there's some catch up and, deferred,
I'm sorry,
Right.
the contract is $2 million more than we expected for the entire year.
got it, okay.
So-
So it's $2 million for the fiscal year.
Correct, yes,
And you
sorry about
expect-
that.
And would you expect that to be $2 million for the 2021 fiscal year also, or would it be $4 million? Or-
I'm sorry, 2021 would be the 2 million extra thousand
Okay.
we need. $2 million.
two.
Not that. But before, from like February or March through June, we have enough funding within our budget to cover the cost of the contract.
Okay, so Catherine, does that change anything in terms of, because you're 4.7 million on this prior slide, outside of the 343,000 zoo contracts, I think ties into Catherine's 1920 expected expenditures, but I'm hearing you say that the 2 million here is not really needed for our current fiscal year that we're in right now, that's an ongoing future item, or maybe I'm misinterpreting what you're saying.
The 2 million that was awarded is being utilized by our current contract, and we're utilizing that for deferred maintenance, repairs, and things of that nature. So we are utilizing that money.
In our current fiscal
In our
year.
current fiscal year, yes.
So I just want to make sure that I understand. So the 2 million that was added to your budget using Measurex money for park maintenance
And repairs.
in 2021, you really need 4 million? Or is
Correct.
it?
Correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
that's
Sorry,
what I wanted to
that's
get to.
correct.
Okay, so it is a higher, the ongoing amount
Yes.
is going to be much higher. Okay.
Yes.
And it just, one of the things that we had talked with Director Downs on was, kind of identifying ongoing needs versus, kind of one-time spend. So for example, tree replacements, I think, is in our one-time spend.
Right.
Column versus this 2 million, now 4 million, or whatever the number would be, bigger than 2 million number.
Right.
To keep our parks fertilized, mowed, and all
Yes.
that type of stuff that we would all expect our parks to be. So that is, yeah, okay. On the trees, so that's a one-time spend. Obviously, I think we could probably all agree that, that doesn't make our city as many trees as we probably would like to have, and we are an aging city, that, trees have a life cycle also. Have you identified what the ongoing need would be for a tree replacement program, as opposed to just I'm assuming that this 442 are, specifically identified trees and those
Right.
types of things?
Right. We don't have an assessment of our trees, so what we're trying to do is have an assessment. And we just increased our contract with West Coast Arborists for $250,000. We used to only have $50,000 for trees. Now we added $250,000 to that. And so now we have an appropriate amount of money to go out there and assess trees, fix trees, but we'd like for them to tell us what we need to do, kind of like a plan for our trees, and so I don't have that information yet.
Okay, just a comment on this, not necessarily a finance type item, but I think a lot of my neighbors, anytime they see a tree getting cut down by a city worker or any type, they think that, they're killing a perfectly healthy tree.
Yeah.
Whereas I imagine that is probably, it's being cut down for a reason, either safety or it's diseased, it's about ready to fall, and you don't want it to, fall on someone's head.
Right.
So I believe that we have a problem in our city of not communicating some of the things that our city is doing that are well intentioned, but the message is not necessarily getting out to the public in terms of why we're doing certain things. I think that's one of those things that, especially now, I think that we have a public information officer that might be one of those things that you might want to put on your list to be able to communicate to the community about what the plan is for trees and why sometimes they're being taken down, especially when they're in parks.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. The community should be notified ahead of time, and then we should be posting signs at the site, at least a week ahead of time, and so.
I have a few remaining questions also. So the park security program, which you and I have spoken on before, and I'm overall supportive of it, but it was supposed to be a temporary type program to kind of gap fill until the time that the park ranger program can be established, or maybe another security company that you go through a full RFP type process instead of using our existing security program. Where is the city at with RFP and maybe even the PD with the parks ranger, especially with the hiring success that they've been having?
I'll start with the RFP. We're going to be waiting until June to do the RFP, so we're going to give this security company some time to work out the kinks, and then we'll go out with an RFP. But I'm not sure where the police department is with hiring of park rangers. I would have to get back to you on that.
Would that fall under Parks and Rec, or would that be a PD type issue, or is that it's one of those things like, hey, we're not quite sure yet?
We're not quite sure yet.
Okay.
Park rangers are under the police department. I've been in other agencies that they're in Parks and Rec or the police department. It just depends on the pleasure of that city.
Okay. And then I believe that the city has also implemented some cameras, I think, at certain locations, which I think are in parks.
Yes.
If I recall correctly. Could you give a quick comment in terms of, is that working well? Is it something the city likes, or is it something your department wants to expand that program?
Right. There are some security cameras that are installed at parks, for example, at Madison Park. The security cameras are vandalized, they're spray painted, they're broken, they're not monitored. So someone's not sitting there watching the camera when crimes happen and things happen. So they can go back to the tape, obviously. The police department is able to do that. But for the amount of money that we've been spending on these cameras, I just think that they are not working.
About how much are we spending?
I would say it's like $100,000 per park from what they put in.
We have like 5 parks or so?
There's about to be 6 parks.
Okay.
And so, like at Madison, I'm sure it can touch the camera on the side. So then they can just pop those out. And so I don't know if that's the solution or if it's really helping much. They also have those code blue cameras, and they're putting those in. I think those are very helpful in case somebody needs something and they can at least get to that and call for help. But I would probably rather put my money into something else, like a park ranger or the security services.
Okay, sure, good. How many, I mean, you know, we have your needs here. I mean, what do you need, what dollar amount, what do you need to run the parks program, Parks and Rec, the way that you would want it to be? Or maybe in terms of incremental would be probably our best gauge here?
Right. We are in the process of doing an evaluation of the entire department, our programs and services, not the Parks Master Plan, but Jeannie was just involved today. We've been doing this for about 6 months now. So it really looks at our pricing, our cost recovery, our programs, what are we offering, what's the community offering, are we duplicating? So on the recreation side of the house, we're waiting for that to happen. On the park side of the, so before I can give a number on that.
Okay.
On the park side of the house, I'm very happy because we're getting the staff to make our parks better. And it's just the basic amenities and necessities is what we're looking for on the park side. So we're doing a lot of RFPs right now, and like now I need $2 million more for the landscaping contracts. So I can't give you a number right now, but we're in the process of identifying how much we really need for that. But I can certainly get back to you with that for sure.
Okay. And a follow up on that. That was actually the answer I was hoping you weren't going to give me, but because I was hoping you would give me a number because then you would identify that and hopefully it has spoken to the city manager on it. And
yeah.
So one of my concerns is that we are in a that financially sometimes it feels like to the public, and you know we know that everything is happening. There's a lot of stuff. You know we have great city employees that are working hard and doing everything they can. But it seems like I think from the public side that it's the first person to the table asking for money is the one that, you know, the first to the table is the one that's getting fed. And to where, I mean, we see, you know, the police officers, which I think we all are appreciative of the police officers, but we also want great parks. And,
right.
And so we hear about, you know, the police officers coming to the table and saying we need X, Y, Z, but we're not hearing from, you know, from Parks and Rec, or maybe in the same type of thing last meeting with Public Works that, hey, here's the inventory of everything, of all the departments' needs. Mm-hmm. And now council and the residents are able to say, well, what are our priorities? Right. And it's really hard to do, I think, when we don't have that big picture. And to where then it looks like, and maybe it's, and hopefully it's not that way, but it looks like the first to the table is the one that's getting fed.
Right.
The most organized department is the one that's getting, you know, getting fed in that process. Right. And to where I personally want to have, you know, top-notch open space in parks and the recreation staff to be able to go do that. We're one of the youngest cities in the country, as you know, and we should have, you know, top-notch parks for everyone to be in. So I would encourage you to put the gas pedal on
right.
on that and advocate for your department to be able to where you are also in that spot where you're saying, hey, this is what our needs are, and
right.
the community, you guys need to be, you know, speaking into what is, you know, the priority. You know, what this council members know what the priority is, so they can make, you know, good decisions for all of us too.
Absolutely. Just to, before the city manager, well, actually, right when the city manager came on, I sat with Catherine and the city manager and made a presentation about our needs for the department. That's how we got all this. And so I understand what you're saying, but that really didn't get out to the community. Yeah. So understood.
And that's what I'm saying. I know that there's a lot of you know, stuff that's happening that we aren't aware of, and a lot of it, you know, sometimes we don't need to be aware of it. But it's the perception, I think, out there that is, you know, everyone's perception is their own reality. And when we're seeing, you know, consistently that, you know, the police officers are being taken care of, which they should be, but we also need to be taking care of other departments also.
Absolutely. Agreed.
And that's it for me. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Alrighty.
Oh, I'm sorry. The bags that I gave you are our park ambassadors that drive around in vehicles. They go and check on permitted activities, and so they're going to be filling these with information. I ordered 2,000 of them, giving them to the community, because I want to see these bags all over the community. Parks Make Life Better is a branding campaign with our professional association, Parks and Recreation, that the entire state of California is getting behind. So we're on the bandwagon, and inside there you have our new activity guide that just came out. So please use these when you go grocery shopping.
Thank you. I believe, Catherine, it's your turn.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so just as a follow-on to that, we'll follow up by email as we've had in the past with feeding you additional information based on your questions tonight. We'll go back and take a look at a few things. So you are at the point in your agenda. When we talked last, at your last meeting, you expressed a desire to prepare some kind of initial report to the city council. And then you would have some kind of report going to them in March with your budget recommendations. And so this agenda item is on your agenda to give you the opportunity to discuss and maybe prepare the structure of what that initial report might look like. So the report that we prepared that has the pies in it and the information and the summary tables, because we prepared it and it's our assertion of what those numbers are and that information, I think of that as the staff report that you can use as your basis for your report, plus all of these meetings and the information that you've gathered. And then we have the auditor's report on our report, basically saying that the numbers that we are in there are fairly stated. So I would defer to the committee as to how you want to proceed with preparing the initial report that you discussed during your last meeting. And as a reminder, we talked about a couple different methods that you could use. We can put something up on the screen. You can craft comments. I can type them up there. You can develop appoint a subcommittee to go back and draft something and bring it back to the committee. So it's really up to you guys what you want to do.
Keith had some initial comments and statements about what you gave us. I think it's a good starting piece. I was alarmed. I was at a Chamber of Commerce gathering, and the city manager was talking about the budget, and the police department, well, not the police department, the police union specifically asked if the budget was in the black. And the city manager, rightfully so, said that, well, we're technically in the black, a certain amount of millions of dollars. I take that as what Tim was just talking about. They are looking to see how much money extra is that they can take. I raised my hand and I said, wait a second. City manager, isn't there a structural deficit but for Measure X? And she said, there's not a structural deficit. And I said, no, there is a structural deficit. And that's what we've got here. And what I'd like to make, at least my view of this initial report to the city is, there is still a structural deficit. But for Measure X, you still have to fix, there are some things that have to be fixed. We've heard Parks and Recs, they've lived off of grants. We've heard Public Works, they live off of grants. Well, if you're going to fully fund those departments with regular revenue, you still have to fix the hole. You have to figure out how to fix the hole. And when you put in there, rightfully so, you put in that there was I can't remember where I was reading, was it whether it was 1.7 or 2.5 million dollars of easy deficit reduction efforts that they did not take. And so I'd like to use this document as like, hey, it's going to come, but remember, we at the tax committee believe that there's still a structural deficit that needs to be addressed. And I don't know how you do that. She talked about security guards. Parks and Rec talked about security guards. I remember back when the city looked at CCTV as a possibility. Cheaper. Have people sit in a room, monitor screens like they do in Europe and elsewhere. And the mayor was, and I think we tried it for a period of time. I'm just saying that I think that our voice needs to be, we need to address, and I think we need to give you guys the tools you and the city manager, to say, look, guys and gals, we're overspending. And we need you to address the structural deficit so we can fulfill our needs as the Citizens Oversight Committee to say, Parks got X, Public Works got Y, and it's general revenue. It's not just grants and other things. So when I read this, I'm like, okay, I'd like to overemphasize the structural deficit. So it gives staff the tools to go in there. Obviously, the city council makes the final decisions, but if fellow residents are saying fix the structural deficit, staff has made recommendations, hey, we can trim here, we can change this, and the council still overrides it, well then, they have to answer to the voters. But I think we would be doing the public a disservice if we didn't say, there's a structural deficit, Measure X fixed it for now, but we still have to address the problem. Because at the same meeting I was at, city manager said the budget starts to go like this. Pension costs and everything. So at some point we have to address it. So I don't want to be the ones to say, oh yeah, everything's hunky-dory. I want to say, hey, it's still a structural deficit, got to address it. Whoever it is, current council or future council, have to address it.
There's actually 3 points there that I think are important to note. So there's an existing structural budget deficit, like we talked about, the 10.2 million.
Yeah.
Then on top of that, there is a service deficit, which has not been quantified. So you heard Lisa say that she needs more money. You heard William say he needs more money for streets. You've even heard the police say we need more police officers. So we have the identified structural deficit. We have a service deficit. And then the third thing is the concept of we only have 10 years of this revenue at this level, then it drops down, then we only have it for another 10 years after that. So there's actually 3 components to what you might refer to as a deficit.
Yeah, and so for me, I think about when she talked about we have a bunch of deferred maintenance. Well, those are one-time costs. Those are easy things to do, right? I got to fix this. We can all, and not only us, but staff and the city council can point, we fixed the bathrooms in the parks. That's what Measure X money went to. And you figure out how you guys do it, but I think that we would do a service to everybody if we identify the deficit, however you want to identify it. There is a structural, there is a service deficit. And the residents, I think, loud and clear know there's a service deficit. When we sat through response times with police, there's a service. When someone says my car got robbed, police do not get there. It's basically you take care of it yourself. So, however we want to do it, but I think the emphasis on there's a deficit and the voters helped you out, but we only gave you 10 years to fix the thing. And who knows if they're going to renew it. So, to me, how we use that preamble or the background or however you want to use it, I think to me is essential to getting the message across. Because as long as I'm here, I'm happy to keep saying there's a structural deficit until it gets fixed. Because at some point we have to address it. And we might as well do it over a 5-year period than 1 year shock and awe and cut everything, which is a concern. So,
and then the other side of that too is, there's certainly the thought that you don't cut you don't cut the budget in other ways or whatever. You find ways to enhance revenue to get up to what it is that you need. So there's actually 2 sides to the coin.
If you think about it, technology alone has not been adapted even at the planning counters. I mean, let's do basic stuff, block and tackle stuff the cities do all the time. Mm-hmm. We have good technology. At least I know the infrastructure is good. So buy the software. I'm sorry, we have to have discussions about this. Yeah. You can be retrained for another job, but simple things that other cities do, we don't do. When you listen to what she has to say about the parks, we don't do the simple things. We don't do the block and tackle. We do get some grants and a dog park. Are you kidding me? We don't have basic parks. People can't walk the parks at night, and you want to spend money on a dog park. So to me, I think it behooves us as oversight to say, look, do the basic things. Fix the structural deficit. Look at service over a 5-year period. And then there's 5 years in the out years. Then you have money to play with. You can figure out what you want to do. I mean, if you say the deficit is $10 million, that's $2 million a year in 5 years. while you're maintaining service levels or enhancing some, right? So that, to me, that's what this report could reflect. Because there's some people that have grown up in the city and things have not gotten better for them. It's gotten worse. And that's just sad. It's really sad. So to me, you know, my kids are almost grown, almost out of high school, but this money can really turn the city in the right direction with the right people and the right voices to say, guys, let's fix it. Fix the simple stuff. When there's no app for the planning counter, that drives me nuts. When people have to come down here and sit here half a day to get permits for their house, you're kidding me. In Anaheim, I go, and I can get my permit. I submit my, you know, you guys have worked in cities, you know what that's like. And that to me those are the things that we can invest in. Some of it's one-time spending, and then simple maintenance. So I think the background document, at least from my viewpoint, and this document can reflect there's a structural deficit. We want you to tackle it. Do what you're elected to do, basically. So that's what I think this document can be used for, the initial document.
I fully agree. I think it's a great idea. I think one of the things that I think when we first sat down at this table, everybody was shocked to realize that most of the money was going to pay off debt, and that I think it was a little bit deceptive on the part of how this was presented to the populace, and they're not getting what they paid for. Quite simply, and I'm in full agreement. I mean, there's, you know, all those wonderful things that were supposed to happen, and they're not going to. And I fully agree that this is the time to put the light on it and show people what's really going on.
Yeah, I can't disagree with anything that anyone said so far. Going back to our logistics on this is your document though, right, Catherine? The one that is before us. This is because you have a requirement to report on historical. So in this case, the fourth quarter of our fiscal year, April to June. So this is your report that you're planning to send to council.
Right.
Is that right?
Right, and it can go at the same time as your report so that they have the full picture. This is what staff provided us, and this is our report to the council.
Okay. Now, I believe that our report is supposed to be presented in March, which it was to be at least I envisioned it more as a, maybe not this first year, but on an annual basis, speaking into the budget for the upcoming.
That's right.
Year. Although I don't think that we have any necessary guidelines, other than I think it does say that it can be used in the budgeting process. So I mean, that's the intent, is that those comments from this committee would be, hopefully absorbed by council and considered by council and by staff, because obviously staff puts the budget together and then council, I suppose, responds to it and ultimately votes on it. So these types of items of priorities, I think, are of utmost importance. But the document before us, this is your document, of which obviously we can speak into, but this is your document. And the only thing that I would add, which I talked to you on, would be the car rebate thing, because again, that's the most direct item related to Measure X. In the first year, you get it in there, and now it's just it's going to be recurring in there. In terms of this group, I mean, right or wrong, I mean, I think we all have expressed our frustration with, oh my goodness, like does everyone know how bad it really was? But we can't do anything about that, but we can make sure that people know what's going on, which I think is what citizens committee, oversight committees are for. But really, this that the use of this one-time money is what I think we have our biggest impact as this group would be, of which we have two different. We have a overall general fund one-time use of one-time expenditure for their current fiscal year of $6.6 million, and then in terms of kind of more identified X funds would be 5.2. If I'm interpreting what I have in front of me from Catherine, and so really identifying that, hey guys, this is, if you keep everything status quo, and then you take away that one-time money, this is the money that we, you can decide to do different things with, Parks and Rec, with and I think, your point on, well, how much in the black are we, and that's 100%, that's what I feel is like, okay, well, there's a reason why the police union didn't renegotiate their contract when it expired, because they wanted to, for that money to come on board. And the same, they are highly strategic in what they're doing, which they should be. I want all of our departments to be that way, though, and then so that way we can the council can make a good decision over all of this. So that's why I think I'm glad that we're doing these departmental type meetings so we can get a grasp on what each of these areas need. But I mean, would you agree that the one-time money, Catherine, whether it's 5.2 or 6.6, would be, I mean, that's money that the city, assuming that revenue stay exactly the same and all the other expenditures stay the same, that the council would need and staff would need to be coming up with a use for that money, or it goes into reserves. Would that be
That's correct. And on
assumption?
September 17th, the city council appropriated $4 million of it. $2 million for roadway maintenance, $1 million to set aside for youth services, and $1 million for the quality of life team.
But that was appropriated from last year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
So,
and
but
I'm
this
sorry,
would be,
which 5 point, what are you?
So I'm on page 3 of your report, page 21 of 23 of the packet.
Okay. Okay,
Which is,
I
for the
see,
19
the one-time
1920.
money, yes, okay.
So I'm referring to the 6.6 million.
Gotcha, okay.
One-time column.
Mhm,
and-
yes.
Or, alternatively, the 5.2 on the
Mm-hmm.
next page of one-time, 1920 X expenditures.
Right,
So this would be, in a normal course would be, if everything else stayed the same and we didn't have, the council and staff and then approved by council would need to find a use for this, whether that be, put it in general fund reserve
Right.
or, other priorities.
right, that is correct. One of the things that I would encourage you to do tonight is to decide, what your format is going to be, and then, fill it with your content. So, for example, last meeting, you spoke of really 2 pieces. One, a preliminary piece going to city council that says, we're concerned about X, Y, and Z. And then the second would be your budget recommendations that would go to the city council in March, in time for the budget process. So, when I hear some of the comments that have been made, it sounds like those are the concerns that you have that would go in that preliminary piece to council, if that is the way you still want to proceed. So that preliminary piece to council, do you want it to be in the form of a letter from the committee? Or, can you give me a little bit more insight as to where you might be leaning for that?
My personal opinion is a letter. I don't think we need to go overboard, but I think a letter that gets the point across.
Okay.
That's just my opinion.
My concern on a letter is, which I think we should do a letter. I don't know if that's the end of the story, because I'm afraid that a letter is just going to be received and filed, and hopefully they all read it. But I feel like sometimes someone in front of them is going to be, and I still think we should do a letter no matter what. But someone in front to be able to speak into it. It's not on a consent calendar. It's an actual item, and who knows? Maybe even the public might be interested in hearing it, as well as maybe even speaking into some of the items if they have an opportunity to look at it. So that would be my suggestion: is that we do a letter, as well as then a presentation of expressing orally what some of those concerns are.
I agree with you. That sounds like something that I would personally feel like that's the best way to go.
Okay.
Just because, like how you said, I think the letter would probably just get it seen and maybe just skim through it and then be like, all right, okay, next. So
I think that's the right way to go. I think a PowerPoint, like we've got a bunch of numbers here in the first 3 paragraphs you gave us of the background. It's easy to highlight budget shortfall, structural deficit, those slides tend to sit with people. And that gets the point across, because the letter, you're right, people just read the letters verbose and thanks a lot. But 2 or 3 slides that basically say structural deficit, thank you voters, we have to thank the voters somehow. I feel we need to thank the voters. Council may not want to thank the voters, but the voters, without the voters, we'd be cutting a lot. We'd be cutting a lot. And so I think that, and then how we express that structural deficit, what you identified in multiple parts. How we tell them, look, it's coming. In March, we're going to tell you we would like parts of the structural deficit fixed. We'd like to see a glide path to fixing it. And to me, that's kind of, I think, how we do it. But I do it like I do a PowerPoint. The letter, and then easy to line it out, because you've described it to us very easily. Budget was here, structural deficit, council had a chance. Well, it was like the first day we were here. They didn't cut 1.2 or whatever it was, and the voters fixed it. So I think that's something that we can use multiple times. Because when we come back next year, right, Parks and Rec's got this, you guys will be able to do that and explain it to them. So, yeah, I'm in full agreement with letter, and I think a 2-3 page PowerPoint's all we really need to do.
I mean, you've sat in front of those committees before, so I highly respect your opinion on that, and especially because you're able to absorb what's in front of you and what's going to be most impactful.
Well, and the voters are visual learners. Most people are visual learners now.
Yeah.
So a PowerPoint with simple things on it, we don't clutter it up, and we do it. Because the letters are cluttered. I mean, I sit and read comment letters to them. It says CMS and 20 pages, and my eyes glaze over. But PowerPoints or charts, they work the best. And I think the council members will get it. Let's simplify it for them too. Because I think how we explain it to them, and because you explain it very easily to us. It can easily be put in a PowerPoint. Right? City budget's here, hole was here, revenue Measurex filled it. However, this hole still remains. But for Measurex, that kind of stuff. And then I think the other thing that I would like to express is that I would front load this tax with one-time funds. I think that decision, I understand why they made the police decision, but if you fix the bathrooms, if you replace the trees, if you pave the roads, right, you buy 10 years, you buy 20 years. I can't even remember the last time the bathrooms were fixed in the parks. You buy a long time. So you think about that part, right? And then you don't have your ongoing exposure, right? Pension deficit and whatever else it is. I think that's what most people do with their home budgets. So if we explain it in those terms, right? I fixed the window because it's broken. I don't leave it because I want, brand new jacuzzi outside. That's my take on it. I think it's an easy thing to explain. We just have to letter plus a couple slides, 2-3 slides, easy.
Okay.
I mean, logistically, we're sitting here in the middle of December, and we need to present our formal report in March, which means that I think ideally this would be done, end of January, beginning of February, just calendar-wise, right? So I'm.
If you were to come up with something PowerPoint-wise, like, if you were to come up with something PowerPoint-wise, we can do a telephonic meeting, right? We can do that, right? We have to actually have a meeting.
Yep, you do.
Unless it was a committee, is that right?
Subcommittee.
A subcommittee, then are we?
Then we can approve it,
Are you able
and
to
then
be
we
involved
can-
with that, Catherine, or is that?
Well, you mean a subcommittee of the council, or?
No, a subcommittee of
No,
this
it's a
group.
subcommittee,
I like that.
okay. So, let's see, here's your options. If we could get through the basic content of what you want in your initial communication to city council tonight, and you could authorize a subcommittee that is not a quorum to basically approve, so you basically tell me, this is the content of what we want. I take good notes, I repeat it back to you, we make sure we have a meeting of the minds. Then I go back to the office, I craft something. During this meeting, I believe we could do this. I think you could appoint a subcommittee and authorize that subcommittee to basically say yay or nay on the work product that I come up with for you guys. And then it can be presented, maybe. I'm not real sure, because it gets really tricky.
Would the committee be able to make changes to it on the fly during that period, or is it,
Well, I guess-
go back and redo it?
Yeah,
and
it's
then
like,
you're-
it's really the best way to do it is to have another meeting, unless we can craft out the basics during this meeting. So,
Well, I reviewed this online, I made some notes to myself, and then I started changing it around. The gist of what you gave us works for a letter. Because it's the facts, it's what it is. I'd probably put a little bit more in the preamble part, the background part, to emphasize structural deficit, still there kind of stuff. As for PowerPoints, that's a different deal. I mean, you can convert this into a letter, I don't think it would be that hard, though. You fix the preamble a little bit, and I've made some notes here. Then the Citizens Oversight Committee is referenced in the ordinance that was adopted. Then you've got some charts that I think work. You don't need the charts?
This is her report, though.
Oh, this is your report?
Yeah.
This is her, the document we have in front of us is.
But you're gonna
because
give the
she has
council?
to report to council.
yeah, I have to provide an
So, I mean,
annual
this is her
report.
document, which I think we can speak into, but I mean, it's really, she's the owner of this
Okay.
particular document. And that's where I think she's saying that, okay, if
So
we
she wants
want
us to come up with a letter and then,
well, it's something, if it's from this group, I think it's, it needs to express our
okay.
Exactly.
our concerns. If Sounds has concerns, then she can express those herself, but.
Yeah, because it's very difficult for you to direct me to prepare your letter for you.
Well, are we all taught and set on a letter, or is the PowerPoint going to work? I mean, if the PowerPoint does what we need it to do and it's presented publicly to the council,
Then maybe you don't need a letter.
then you don't really need a letter. I'm really leaning towards your idea on that, because I personally like letters, but, because I read them, but I understand where you're coming from.
Well, and the other
you're
thing is, if you want to
overburdened
be
with
able
them.
to, if you want to be able to tell the next council, right, we're gonna have another election in November. If you want to be able to tell the next council, this is where we were, 4 years later, after this is where we are, you can use those PowerPoint slides to fix. And we can always put a cover page, the Oversight Committee, per ordinance, blah, blah, blah.
You can have the quick blurb on the PowerPoint, but I think you hit the nail on the head. The visual part is great, and especially if it's done in a council meeting, right?
Yes.
Then the public can see it, and if you can get this out where it's, the public can comment on it, I think you
Well, and
killed two birds with one stone.
like in my universe, we use grand jury reports all the time. The county does a ton of grand jury reports, right? Well, those reports are viewable. I can read them. I can get to them. I assume that's what we do here. We put it on, they put it somewhere on the city website and people can read it. So to me, however you want to do it is fine with me. I agree that letter is a letter, but
No, I agree with it.
and
Ultimately,
all of you up here, but for me and maybe you, Keith, these are all numbered people.
I'm not.
So
I'm
looking
not a
at
number
numbers
guy.
and what it says, they should be able to put bullet points together. It shouldn't be hard. Budgets here, holes here,
Yeah,
Measurex here, structural deficit.
and I agree with keeping it real simple, because again, you guys are talking, I'm
Yeah,
not a
no, but
financial person.
the rest of them are all numbers people.
I'm
You
not.
and I are not.
And when you start talking that stuff, it's like, yeah, okay, great. But if you just give me straight, simple stuff, and again, for the public's benefit, I think we have an obligation to do that, to keep it simple. And I really, really do like the PowerPoint, the quick blurb about who we are and what we do, and have it on the council, so the public can see it and comment if so desired.
You had your powwow. What do you guys think? You want to just do? You can want to open up a PowerPoint document we do right now.
Yeah, and
That's easiest.
that's what we were thinking. The thing that we were just discussing was whatever you display on the video screen
Oh, becomes
is
public.
going to be displayed as part of the video record
I got
of this meeting, Which may be fine because you're using this meeting to
Deliberation,
craft
right.
something. But just keep in mind that whatever we do up on the screen, it is going to get captured as part of the public record for this meeting.
I'm okay with that.
I mean, we're
Yeah.
deliberating about what we're gonna do. We're not-
Yeah, okay.
It doesn't
All
matter to
right,
me.
so, okay,
Well,
very good.
Are we all in agreement on that?
You guys okay with that?
I'm 100% on it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So I guess just open a PowerPoint document.
Yeah, did discuss this. Prepare. That's why I worded it that way.
Yeah, Catherine, would it be okay if we have the public speak on anything at this point before we do? Oh, they do not?
That's correct.
Oh, okay, great, thank you. Thank you.
That's, yeah.
Sergio is a PowerPoint guy.
Yeah, Word, right? On the bottom, Microsoft. Office there. No, I think it's under W.
See, my computer at work not even this far.
Yeah, because Word, it's easier for me to type faster.
Come on, you know you wanted to open an Excel document.
No, I really don't.
Why is the rest of the committee pretty happy with Excel documents? Not me.
Okay. All right, and let's see if we can make this a little bit bigger.
Down on the right.
Oh, yeah, thank you. No, I mean like the, yeah, the type, well, I guess that will do it. Okay. So slide 1, and this is difficult to see. You want a statement of committee purpose? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, committee purpose, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds fair.
Okay. Slide 2, do you want to just dive right in on your concerns, or do you want a chart of something? What are you looking for on slide 2?
I think we should get into the concerns. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, are we talking about concerns as a graph where it's deficit for the last like 4 years to today? Or
Personally, because
Written.
again, I'm not a numbers guy like you people are. For me, being, if for lack of a better term, a layperson on this, I like to see what our concerns are verbalized, and then get into the graphs and that type of thing. That's just my opinion.
yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so the concerns,
I would, in terms of me speaking into the concerns, I think it goes beyond, for me, it goes beyond just the numbers, but also the process of, if we think back on our first meeting, we did not have an opportunity to be able to speak into that first budget, which I think is highly disappointing. It was for me, at least. And so, obviously you can't go back in time, but, put it on the record that, hey, council, you guys have a duty, in my opinion, to be able to appoint committees timely.
Agreed.
This was voted on in November, I think it was, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I would say that, hey, you've handicapped
That's right.
Yes,
this
agreed.
committee.
I agree. I think that's a very, very.
And that's
good
on,
point.
that's on council.
Yes. No, I think that's an extremely good point, because again, we're after the fact.
And this is the most important
Yeah,
year. This is the
exactly.
first year, because everything
But-
else is plus or minus.
You want another concern, ongoing structural deficit?
Yep.
Can we put a year to that? Since when? I mean, you mentioned Great Recession.
I think it's been that way as long as I can remember. And we've just patched things, cut things, done, I mean, city staff and finance department have done an amazing job of somehow keeping us somehow going in the right direction. Because we're in a good economic times and we still have a structural deficit. I mean, that goes to show you when someone says we can grow our way out of it, it's very hard. Very hard for Santa Ana to grow its way out of it.
I mean, as speaking as a finance person, though, if I'm hearing this committee say that we're in a structural deficit, and we've been in a structural deficit for, for the past 10 years, I mean, in my world, that would be false, because a city has to have a balanced budget.
Okay.
I mean, we don't have a choice. I mean, you can pull from reserves, but that's still balanced. And so,
So what would
it's not a
so it's not a deficit?
and this is probably where the city manager, who's also a CPA,
Sure.
and is probably saying, no, we're not. It's actually, you can't have it as if we're ongoing. Now you can have, the graph, the chart, the one I call the scary chart. This chart.
I like that chart.
So embedded in my mind.
So let me play devil's advocate. So that's why people are in shock. That's why people are in shock, because we're not using household language. When you say the city has to be balanced every year, okay, I get it. But we're robbing money out of reserves to do it every year. So maybe
it's a bigger thing. It's the service deficit that Catherine is referring to. Is that you're choosing what services are important.
So if the term is not structural deficit, what's the term?
Might I offer?
Operational deficit? Ongoing operational deficit?
What I might offer is, without Measure X revenue, there is a structural budget deficit. With, even after Measure X revenue, there is still a service deficit.
Well, no offense again, because I'm not a financial person. When you say structural deficit, I mean, most people are going to go, what are you talking about?
Okay.
You make it plain English. I mean, I know you guys operate in that realm.
So concerns are expenses exceed.
There you go. Just like at home. Right?
Expenses exceed revenues without Measure X. Is that right? Is that the right statement?
But for there would have been the city would have had no
She's got it in her report. I mean, she's got
Okay.
31.9 million more.
Expenses exceed revenues.
I think that's it. I don't think you need to add anything else. That's a very straightforward statement.
Right.
Expenses exceed revenue.
Do you want without Measure X, expenses exceed revenues, or?
Yes. Yeah, because Measure X is.
I've heard you say this, I've heard you all try to vocalize some of your concerns, and what I was hearing was something along the lines of, okay, there's this notion of without Measure X, expenses exceed revenues, and Measure X is a limited source of funding, meaning that it's only going to be around for so long. You only have so much of it. So that it kind of drives home the point that, this is a temporary solution, albeit 20 years, but it's a temporary solution.
And even more so, we have a temporary solution, temporary revenue side, but we are making permanent expenditure decisions.
Yeah, so Measure X is temporary. It's just, that's it.
Measure X revenue is
Temporary revenue. That's what I had in my mind, at least.
is temporary, and
You could put a period after that. And then the next line you could say is one-time expenses should be favored over ongoing expenses. I mean, that's me speaking. I don't know how the rest of you feel. Because that goes to deferred maintenance and all the other road, like if we fixed one road, right? The life of a road is what, 20 years? Isn't that what he said last time? I don't remember. About 20 years? I mean, those are the expenses.
oh goodness.
I mean, most companies add capital before they add humans. It's kind of what happens, unfortunately.
Yeah, because they can't raise taxes.
Right, because then you have FTE costs.
Okay.
I think there needs to be something between Measurex revenue as temporary and one-time expense, you know.
Yeah, like, it's just another line.
Yeah, I think,
If you-
in between there.
If you hit enter, make it a whole nother sentence. Yeah, that's better, yeah.
I think the statement, the flow in the
Right.
way it is written right now, which I like, after Measurex revenue is temporary, I think there should be something in there that states something to the effect of, we need a balanced budget that matches our expected revenue without Measurex. Compress that statement as best as we can, but I think that's the statement that needs to go between one-time expenses and Measurex
Okay.
revenue.
So it'd be just another, bullet point.
Balanced,
Ongoing operating revenues.
let's see.
I mean, overall, I think the community felt like Measure X was going to be adding to quality
Yes.
of life,
Yeah. So,
not 2/3 of the revenue
the city budget.
being, what we've had for the past 8 years.
Okay.
And it's-
The budget should be balanced, I'm sorry.
Without Measure X funds.
Yeah, without consideration of Measurex revenue.
Or
That's accurate.
maybe it should be the ongoing budget? The ongoing budget should be balanced?
Or you could say the pre-Measure X budget.
Or the,
However-
yeah.
However you want to say it, I mean,
Well,
but
this
that's.
yours, so.
Right. So
Yeah,
the-
I like that. The city budget should be balanced without Measure X revenue moving forward.
Yes.
And then the one-time statement is
Well,
perfect.
you could say balance, the city budget should balance without Measure X revenue.
Yeah, should balance, yes.
Yeah, instead of should be balanced.
Right.
Perfect.
And I would add to that, saying, and again, we're getting into a letter as opposed to, but just the topic of this, that to where then we're able to use X funds for,
Right.
rainy day fund, for, hey, we want to have top-notch parks, not just okay parks, the best parks. We can have priorities and put the money where the priorities of the residents are, as opposed to what's happened. And so, your ongoing budget needs to be balanced, but we still have, the voters voted for it, so we have the 60 million. It needs to be prioritized towards what the voters really want from a quality of life perspective.
But I think that's the problem is everybody was kind of misled as to where that money was going to go. I mean, my impression when I read the ballot measure was all this money is going to do all this wonderful things, and that's not what's happening. And to me, that's the biggest problem we've got. There really is no oversight and input on how this money gets spent.
Okay, let's see.
Put
what-
that in 10 words.
Yeah,
You could,
or less.
you know what, another bullet is, concerns is reserves are used too frequently, and we should work towards having a legitimate reserve. Because what you said was, last year, you used reserve to fill the hole,
As a stopgap.
as a stopgap. And I assume they did that every year to balance the budget. There was probably never a year in the last 8 years where you had excess revenues over expenses, or did you?
Yeah, to clarify, Committee Member Leo, the city budget for 18-19, you're absolutely correct. There was a $10.2 million structural deficit that was identified, and one-time funding or one-time reserves was utilized to fill that gap, if you will. For the prior years, that was the revenues on, the budget was balanced, so operating revenues equaled operating expenditures. There were some service cuts or certain priorities were not funded, as evidenced by some of those funded positions in order to balance the budget, but in actually physically using or transferring reserves, that did not occur, yeah.
And we have to remember that the city has a reserve policy, and they're still, even after utilizing the 10.2, in the budget, they were still within that city policy of, of the reserve policy. They have the 16.67% and the 1%.
So let me ask, what is a healthy reserve? Do we have a healthy reserve? I mean, now at Measure X, I assume we're okay, but what is a healthy reserve? Because if you want to bring the fiscal health of this city back to where it should be, we should have healthy reserve.
And quite honestly, I can't give you a quick answer to that. It's
Okay.
debatable. Because the correct way to establish a reserve is to do a risk analysis. Because when you have a reserve, you're basically mitigating risk.
Right.
And so you have to do that risk analysis to establish the reserve. Pulling a number out of the air is not a risk analysis. And there has been no risk analysis done here at the city. That's the proper way to establish your reserve. And in general, I can tell you that larger cities with larger budgets require less of a percentage reserve as smaller cities with smaller budgets. So, for example, if you have a small city, I used to work for Rancho Palos Verdes. For that city, maybe a 50% reserve is the right number because it's small potatoes. But for city of LA, maybe 5% is the right number
So-
because it's so very large.
So would the language be appropriate, concerns, no established healthy reserve? I mean, what I'm trying to say is, we got this money, right? If many of you in the room are accountants. What, if you were managing this budget as your home budget, you would start to slowly set aside a little bit of money every year, just in case something hits the fan and we're in trouble. So we could be in trouble if Measure X revenue runs out, right, in 10 years or 20 years. So what I'm trying to do is, I'd like to raise the concern of, because the voters understand, we all understand, I get an extra paycheck at Christmas time. Well, I don't spend it all on, I put a little bit away. So I don't know what you'd say. I don't know what the exact language I'm looking for is. But it's something that, for me as a voter, would say, okay, well, if I need it, I can take it. I can use it.
Yeah.
I get it out of it.
The first should statement, I think, should be followed by another should statement that would be indicative of that. I would recommend something to the effect of Measure X revenue should improve the quality of life of all residents. Period.
It was intended, correct?
Right.
We better to say it was
Or
intended.
so say Measure X
Yeah,
should
added
be-
as intended.
Yeah.
And that's really basic, but it's really,
I can see the cops come in and say, well, we improved the quality of your life.
that's a powerful statement. I like that.
Yeah, agreed.
I agree.
Okay.
One time is great, because now we're talking about how to use the money.
The third statement there, the city budget should balance without Measure X revenue. It feels to me like maybe it could be a little clearer to say something like the permanent city budget, the ongoing, the permanent level of service, something along those lines that, basically indicates what you're trying to shoot for.
Well, did you use Measure, you didn't use Measure X funds for last year's budget gap, right? You used reserves for last year's budget gap.
Oh, the budget?
Yeah, budget.
Yeah, when the budget was originally adopted for 18-19, it was using reserves.
And then when they passed the POA contract, you used Measure X funds for that?
They
Or did
Yes.
you rob reserves and put the reserves back in afterwards with the tax money?
technically hard to say because it all went into the general fund.
Understood. So, I think, I understand what you're saying. So the question is that we learned here that Measure X funds went to fill the structural, well, the existing deficit.
Well, could-
And I think what our commissioner here is saying is that he'd like to see the budget balance without Measure X funds at all.
Yeah, the city should have a balanced budget regardless of Measure X funds.
But see, what they'll say is we always balance it.
But it is because they're using reserve without dipping into the reserve. And I guess it gets complicated because you don't want them to hit the reserve either, right? And you can't just say you're balancing the budget every time you siphon the reserve.
Okay, so a portion of Measure X revenue was used, that's definitely a concern.
So is that something more of where you're trying to go with this? You know, basically saying that, you know, you were bothered by the fact that right out of the gate, Measure X was used
Yes.
to help balance the budget.
And you
Yeah.
can say, you can say,
I wouldn't say service level though, I'd say budget because to me service level, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was
Service
gonna-
level is, again, I'm a layperson, it's like, okay, what are they talking about?
so a portion of Measure X revenue was used to balance the existing budget.
Well,
And-
or you could just be more clear, more specific and say the fiscal year 18-19
Right.
budget.
And I think you need a qualifier in there to say a large portion.
Yes.
Or the largest portion.
Whatever
or-
portion you wanna
I mean, just saying a
A
portion.
significant?
but
Yes.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Catherine, I would recommend
And
you use
going-
parentheses where you want to identify service level for those people who understand what that means after budget. I think it's a good thing that you used it, but I do agree with the chair that budget is a little bit more layman's and it's something that most people are going to be able to
It's-
palate.
A significant portion of Measure X revenue was used to balance FY 18-19 budget without.
Maintain.
Without, I would say without, I want to say without making, they basically didn't follow city staff's recommendation. They didn't follow your recommendation to cut the easy 1.9. They just chose not to. And they waited for this money to come and then they kept they kept it the same. And what I'd like to say is you used Measure X money to plug a hole and didn't make the hard choice. Didn't make the easiest of choices, you guys, identified cuts. And going back to what was there before, a significant portion of Measure X revenue was used to balance FY18 budget. And going forward, going forward, we don't want Measure X funds used to, specifically with the budget. We want it to be like, in addition to. So I don't know how we say that. And it goes to the quality of life, it goes to what the intended, the voters thought that was gonna be used for. The voters thought the budget was balanced and they said, oh, we're giving you extra 60 million a year. Fix the things that haven't been fixed.
It didn't happen. No, I get what you're saying, it's kind of hard to get it in there.
Yeah, maybe it needs another sentence, I don't know.
Yeah, I think it does.
Okay. So,
And instead of.
I think maybe it flows right now.
Maintain existing service level, I think is better than.
I think the
budget
way
at
the way it's
existing
written.
service level.
Yeah, I think the way it's written in context does touch on that point.
It does, because the next sentence says to improve the life.
Yes. So it's a little indirect, but I think it needs to be a little bit as less wordy as possible. Is that right, Graham?
yeah.
Is that right, Graham?
I think for like a suggestion is Measure X was intended to improve the quality of life for all City of Santa residents.
Yes.
Yeah, so my sentence I just wrote was ongoing Measure X revenue is largely keeping the status quo instead of increasing the quality of life of residents. I think that it's essentially keeping everything the same as it's been.
Exactly.
Instead
Yeah.
of increasing.
Yeah, there's no benefit. No
Even
additional
down
benefit.
to the cops that they're gonna hire, that was budgeted before.
Exactly.
Okay, so I can add that in here just to, okay, so read your sentence again,
Yeah,
Tim.
so I have ongoing Measure X revenue is largely keeping the status quo instead of increasing the quality of life of residents.
Improving or increasing?
Improving.
There you go.
Okay,
Then I think we dump.
and then you
Yeah, it's
can,
clean.
Dump that.
Yeah, you could dump the next one. Yeah.
Yeah, you eliminate it.
okay.
We'll see.
It's not really a concern, one-time expenses should be favored.
I think that's more
You're
of a
saying that that's not
recommendation.
a concern?
Well, it's not a concern because they did exactly the opposite. So a concern would be is ongoing expenses were approved.
It almost, I
It
mean,
almost has to be backwards.
it almost seems like this is slide 3, which is
Oh,
recommendations.
Yeah.
Because now it's getting into should statements, you know, this should happen, this should happen.
So then the other concern, then the concern would be is the opposite of the, so the last concern would be is ongoing expenses were incurred immediately after passage of Measure X.
Okay.
Does that make, or recurring expenses, however you want to do it. Because
We're
what they
at-
did was they approved the contract, which, if I read the language of the contract, someone will tell me, oh, we're not gonna have a large police, a lot of police aren't gonna retire this year because, well, in reality, we sweeten the pot, so they'd stay 2 years, and then in 2 years, we're gonna have it done. And that, I took the mayor up on it, and I said, look, when you guys say we're gonna hire 50 cops, you have to say, a certain number's gonna retire, because we just heard that from over here. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is just be honest with us, tell us what we're doing. So that's, but you guys were here for that. They approved the cop contract, which is ongoing expenses, right, for you guys? Or recurring expenses, right? That was the first thing out of the chute. They waited for Measure X and boom, and then they did the contract.
Okay, so we have here,
Yes, that's a concern, yes. And that also goes back to Tim's concern, which was we didn't even get to make recommendations into the budget. Because I guarantee you, we probably would have said, don't do it. We would have said, fix.
Or we would have said, look at the entire picture.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
look
get,
at-
get your inventory of needs,
Right.
like anyone, a
Well, and I
business generally would
think,
do.
and I think to the city manager and to staff's credit, they're trying to get the inventory together. We've heard parks, we've heard public works, which,
do you want to move this statement here to the last bullet?
No, I don't,
Okay, all right.
personally.
okay.
So you want it as still the first, there's the first bullet.
Yeah, because that
Yeah,
was our primary mandate and we couldn't even do it.
Okay, so then the recommendations,
okay. So can you take a moment to just reread all of these concerns and make sure that as a group you're happy with them?
Slide 2, I'm okay with.
I think in the second sentence, you could make that last Measure X revenue is temporary, another bullet point.
Okay, you might have a real estate problem there, but,
That's
Are you
okay.
gonna have one?
Make it work. Tighten up your margin at the top if you have to.
no, I mean,
No,
when you
cover
get, when you get to a slide, yeah.
Oh, I understand.
And maybe once you've crafted the content of it, you can authorize me to make it visibly appealing.
Okay.
And maybe not me, maybe my staff, because they're better at
well, I'm thinking
that.
Sergio's the guy here.
I wish it was you.
I have a question. What's going to go underneath the statement of committee purpose? Or do we have something that we're supposed to put there, or like what's our plan with that?
Yeah, that's a good
The
question.
reason why I'm asking is because that first bullet that you said you didn't want to switch from concerns, if we're going to have a statement, then it should be like, well, the Oversight Committee was not able to make any recommendations, and for that reason, now these are the concerns we have. I don't know, that's just my opinion, because I see what you're saying, like, that Oversight Committee, yes, it's a concern, but more than anything, I feel like the following bullets are concerns. So I don't know if there's a statement that's going there, then kind of like flowing it through. I don't know. That's just my opinion.
That makes sense.
Okay, so let's see here.
But what is
I
the,
would leave that bullet there, but I think to your point, add that in as our purpose.
Yeah, because I'm trying to figure out what are we doing for the statement. the statement of commitment, the purpose? What are we gonna put on there? Like, what's our
Yeah,
goal with that?
and it's up to you. Do you, I mean, you could look at page 19 of your agenda packet. Do you want to repeat what's there at the bottom, A, B, C, D, and E? Or do you, what do you want to do?
I personally don't.
Okay?
I know, in my mind, our mandate was to serve the citizens and make sure the money was spent correctly and have supposedly some input on it.
I mean, maybe what we could put is also just the actual language that was in the ballot, just so it's a reminder to the citizens and they can see it, because, I mean, yeah, we can bring this to them, but some of them probably don't even remember what was on that ballot language. Or I don't know.
So there's two pieces here. The face of the ballot language, like if you just looked at the little paragraph that said yes or no on the ballot, that's the paragraph that said, shall the city charge a sales tax to be used for, maintaining 911 or improving 911 response, retaining police officers and fixing streets, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's that language. And then the full ballot measure was inclusive of an ordinance that had all the language in it, and the ordinance has the specific language that says the committee will act in an advisory role to the city council in reviewing the annual revenue and expenditures of funds from the tax authorized by this article. And so in that ordinance, which was part of what the voters approved, maybe they didn't read it, but that's what was approved. It really talks about just acting in the advisory role and, reviewing the revenues and expenditures. It doesn't really say, it's when you get to the establishing resolution for this committee that it says, make recommendations to the city council.
I would do pieces of it. I would say that, pursuant to the ordinance, all right, or pursuant to the ballot, whatever language you want to use, the committee was established to act as an advisory role to the city council in reviewing the annual revenue expenditures of Measure X. We don't have to say funds pursuant to the article. We can say Measure X, right? So the voter knows.
Yeah.
And then we can say the committee will prepare an annual report to the council and make recommendations for the council's consideration. I think that gets to the why we're here. Right? Then we don't use all the verbose language that the lawyers want to use.
While you were saying that, Commissioner, I thought of something that may sound easier to the ear, at least in the front end. Review, assess, and recommend to the city council. Review, assess, and recommend to the city council.
Well, I mean, be careful here. You don't want to create new language for yourself.
So it would be in reviewing, what did you say, assessing?
Review, assess, and recommend.
But the ordinance didn't say make recommendations. The resolution says
the
make
city.
recommendations.
The city council's approved resolution says that.
Yeah.
So pursuant to the ordinance, we're in an advisory role in reviewing Measure X expenditures, revenues and expenditures. Right?
Measure.
Yeah, I think I would prefer to stick with the actual, that being the first. I personally don't have a problem with also saying that, this group also views its role not only speaking to, or as advisory to the council, but, speaking on behalf of the citizen.
The citizen advocate is how I view myself,
Right.
the citizen advocate.
So I don't have a problem with adding, what we're viewing ourselves as, though, either.
I don't either.
I like
I agree.
And I think that's probably where you're going.
I think so.
I think I would, when we say committee, we should probably say citizen oversight committee.
Yeah,
To emphasize the facts that we're citizens, we're not
non-paid,
non-elected officials.
Yeah, non-elected officials.
Right, that's exactly what we are.
No compensation either, so it's no, doesn't cloud things.
Let's see. I think we can do a little bit better here.
The committee,
pursuant to city council resolution.
you don't even have to say that. You can just say pursuant to the city council or whatever.
It is a
City Council
resolution.
resolution.
The committee, the citizen
The
oversight? Right,
Citizen Oversight Committee
yeah.
Was established.
makes budget recommendations.
Yep.
But we're not, though, that's the problem.
No, we will next, in March we will.
But that's what the,
Yeah,
that's what the
In
resolution
March, that's what
says.
we're gonna do.
The resolution
alright.
says that you'll make budget recommendations.
All right.
So, okay, pursuant to the ordinance adopted by the voters, the committee is to act as a rule to council and measure its revenue expenditures. Present to city council and the city committee's budget recommendations. Okay. Are you okay with what's there? I'm sorry, did you have?
Yeah, since the ordinance is actually by the council, maybe referring to the languages pursuant to the
Measure?
measure approved by the voters.
Okay.
Pursuant
Right, because
to
it's
the
technically an
ordinance.
ordinance, right? Well, I mean,
Yeah, the ordinance is
technically, but-
technically ruled by council, city.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
so
okay.
say pursuant to the measure,
Good catch.
Adopted by the voters.
Measure, yeah, it's actually
Okay.
better.
The
pursuant to the city council.
Citizen
Right.
Oversight Committee is to act in control of the council to city council and review measure its revenues.
I think the word is shall make budget recommendations. That's what it says from here in the ordinance.
Okay.
And then what was it, Abigail, that you wanted to make sure that was on slide one?
Well, no, I hadn't mentioned the first bullet point on the second slide, but I guess, Member Carpenter said he'd prefer on the second slide. So
Okay.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, my only reason for that is that it's a concern that we didn't get to do that. Granted,
Okay.
we were supposed to do that, or given that.
I don't know how they could, well, they could have done it a little faster, but not much, but.
Okay, so are you happy now with slide one as a group?
I personally would also like to be able to say that, individual members also feel that they're here to represent the citizens and their views. I mean, it may not be it may not be a committee charge, but I think it feels like all of us, have a sense of, duty to represent the community.
Committee's overwhelming, just as a suggestion or for consideration, is the committee's overwhelming, I think you mentioned it, Chair, is at citizen advocacy.
Yes, sir.
And that, more than likely in slide one, maybe weave that in, and it's kind of what Catherine is here is the Director Downs is indicating is each member has a sense of duty to represent and advocate for the community. Does that kind of fulfill that citizen advocacy
Personally,
statement?
I would rather have citizen rather than community as an advocate. I don't think, to me, that's a little bit ambiguous. To me, I'm more of an advocate for the citizens. That's how I view my role. I mean, how everybody else views theirs is up to them, but that's my view of it.
The only consideration for change on that I would make would be each committee member feels a sense of duty as opposed to has, because has makes it sound like that's part of what we're charged with, even though I think that may be implied. But the actual language of our charter doesn't indicate that. It actually is more towards the council as opposed to the. And I don't mind the word citizens, although I would probably prefer residents.
I would agree. I would go for
Okay.
that.
The reason she's using citizens, because that's what it says. Why don't you just leave it as for the citizens and residents?
There you go. Make everybody happy.
Right, then it doesn't matter.
At the meeting.
Okay, citizens and residents, that's kind of redundant.
Well,
I think residents is fine.
Okay.
I'm okay with citizens also.
Let's
so.
vote on one, guys. What do you want? I'm for citizens.
Okay, just, if we keep it consistent, say citizens.
Thank you.
Okay.
And then slide two, and everybody's good with slide two? Okay, now we need recommendations.
don't write any of this down yet, but but I feel like in the recommendation, over the past few meetings, we're getting more and more information about the different departments and their needs, and I think whether this happens or not, but we need to have a full inventory of what the needs are, and then addressing them as a whole, as opposed to the term I've been using, first to the table is the first to eat. So however, I don't know if others feel that way or not, and then we can wordsmith it into however we want. But
Vice Chair, let's discuss that a little bit, because I agree with you, but I think if the mandate is quality of life, safety, and per the language, we're all quite hinged on the fact that we anticipated our role to be more focused on that which was written inside of the measure. I like what you're saying, but I think that there needs to be more focus as per the measure in those areas that we were charged with, specifically quality of life, homelessness, maintenance of parks, youth and senior services. I think that would be a very bold statement.
yeah, I'm 100% fine with that. So taking an inventory of those actual items.
That's
Which is what we've kind of been
Yeah.
trying to do, I think, through the departmental, kind of walking through the departments.
Yeah, I think earlier when you mentioned it, I thought you were more general to the whole city rather than those
Got it.
specific departments. I think those specific departments is right.
Yeah, I can see how that could be taken that way, but yeah, I was definitely more concerned with the listed items.
Perfect.
Each service function listed in the ballot measure.
You could say in Measurex, make it easier for you.
Listed in each type of service.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when you read the articles, how much money we're spending on homelessness, well, that's not, I understand the city's spending that money, but like, as I told Supervisor Doe yesterday, the county's got to pony up some money. The city's paying more than the county at times. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would maybe either add on or do another line on that, and prioritize and determine a prioritization for it's
I think it should be another line item,
Okay.
personally.
Yeah, the city should develop a list of priorities. Because I feel like that will help, Tim, that'll help when those who want to get fed first get to the line and say, oh, we're not a priority. Even though they believe they're a priority.
Commissioner, so what I'm reading is really something that we're going to take on, right? We're going to provide recommendations with the priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Perfect.
go ahead.
But the way it's read now, it says the city should develop a list of priorities. But I think we should say that the Measure X should influence that list of priorities. Because right now you're leaving it up to the city. In my mind, that means the council.
Okay.
Does that make sense? If I say the city, in my mind, that's the council, it's not us. So the whole point of this, our recommendations, is that we should have greater influence on how that list of priorities is developed. That's my take on it.
So would you add the city along with the Oversight Committee?
In my
Should take-
mind,
right.
the Oversight Committee should have influence on how that list is prioritized.
Well, we're gonna make a recommendation in March, right? Of how the money can be spent.
But you see what I'm saying, though?
I understand what you're saying.
The city, to me, implies the
Okay.
council. It doesn't imply any of us sitting in this room.
Yeah,
And I think the city should provide an inventory of needs to the Measure X committee too. Again, the city takes an inventory Okay, great. Wonderful. What good does that do to us as a committee?
How about spending priorities need to be made based upon the inventory of needs or
In alignment with.
in alignment? There you go.
Yeah, in alignment with.
Come on, where are our creatives here? You're saying that we're the finance guys. We need the
Hey,
creatives.
listen, you guys are good, you know?
I mean, come on.
How many recommendations is that for?
Okay, does that sound right? Spending priorities should be made in alignment with the needs identified, or?
Yes.
But my whole point on this again is we're not including ourselves in this. I mean, we're not saying
Right.
Measure, I think in my mind, Measure X should have influence on the spending priorities. That's what I think,
Well, I
that's
mean-
my mandate, personally, as a
Right,
citizen.
but all we're gonna be able to do at the end of the day is make recommendations as to what the Measure X funds can be used for.
I agree, but spending priorities should be made in alignment with the needs identified. Well, who's identifying the needs and who's making?
Well, I'll
those-
tell you right now, we're probably doing more than what the council does when we dig in. She's never been asked to give a pre-recession budget. The police were never asked all the questions we asked them.
No, I fully,
And
I fully appreciate that.
and I've heard 3 departments in a row basically say, I'm doing an assessment. Now, that's not only us asking, I guarantee you it's the city manager's office saying, what the heck's going on? You know, when we can't, when you and I can't go online and say, the roads in your neighborhood are gonna be fixed 2021, I guarantee you gotta go to Anaheim, click on the button, it says it.
No, I don't.
So I think that staff's being pushed to give assessments of their own budget. So the question becomes we're actually pouring gasoline on the fire right now, because these folks are being pushed, like she was pushed to present something to us, and she's already being pushed by
No, I
her boss.
fully appreciate it, but to me, again, and this is just.
Okay, that's better, the committee.
There we go. That's what I'm after. Might want to add Measure X committee in there, just for the heck of it.
Yeah.
But that's my point, is my mandate
I
here
understand.
is
I understand what
to
you're saying.
help direct where this money goes.
Okay.
Based on what I hear from the people.
There you go.
There you go. I like it.
And we'll probably do that anyway through our own connection with our city council members, but it's better to put it in the document.
Okay.
Is that a decent list of recommendations for now, guys? I mean, we're gonna have more come March.
Personally, I think we need to I think we got the point across, because to your point, the report is the grand jury document, right?
That's
That
pretty
doesn't
much
go
what it
away. It's there.
Try it.
It's hopefully will be available to the public.
And you know, when they go through the budget process, someone may say, hey, the Citizens Oversight Committee said you should do one-time spending. What, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
I
it can be
agree.
used as a advocacy tool by citizens.
Well, I agree, and that's to my point, is
That's-
that's what we, in my mind, we are citizen advocates.
Well, and
This is just letting the city council know that we intend to do our job, or at least I intend to do
Right.
my job.
Well, and I think if anything, it also helps staff.
Mm-hmm.
It helps staff say, we're not the only ones telling you what you should do. You residents, you appointed, are telling you, please look at these things before you make those decisions.
I'm personally fine with what's there, I think that's enough, but
Yeah, I'm gonna ask them. Mhm.
that's just my opinion, don't let me influence anybody else. Anybody else have anything
You
to
could
add?
add one more bullet, say more to come in March, and then, you know, they'll be so happy with us.
More to come.
To be continued.
Whether you like it or not.
Right? It's like, oh, you can just see, you already know their eyes are gonna roll,
That's the fiscal year 2021 budget recommendation.
right? That's what
Use some
happens.
Measure X spending.
Yeah, because we're gonna give, I mean, listening to what she had to say about the bathrooms, I mean, $1 million or so to fix 7 bathrooms?
That's
People will
nothing.
be, it's nothing, but people will think, hey, the money's going to what I thought it was gonna go for.
Well, it's the public perception, right, that you actually see some results for what you
I
did.
agree.
Because, I mean, the 60K, the 60 million,
Uh,
you know, you go to your neighborhood meetings and everybody goes, well, where's the money? And you go, oh, you know,
Right.
it's one to
Right.
pay the deficit.
Well, and what concerned me was what, and I don't know, well, you were here, Keith, some others weren't here, when Catherine said, the city council's gonna pick and choose which streets they're gonna slurry and
Oh,
do?
yeah.
I'm like, excuse me?
Yeah.
There's a public works director, and he or she can decide, tell you what the priorities are, and we'll slurry these streets. You don't get to pick just because one neighborhood's complaining.
No, I agree.
I mean, that's like discretionary funds, go, if you want to give yourself discretionary funds, I mean, the Public Works, if I listened correctly, they know which streets are the worst.
Well, they've been doing their assessment. I mean, he was pretty
Right.
clear about what they've done as
I
far as their
agree.
assessments go.
Yeah. That's what we need to get away from, this hand-picked projects. Follow the plan.
So Catherine, do you need us to give you any direction on ability to
Yeah.
refine this? And,
I actually have
and-
several questions.
Yeah.
So, the first is, on your slide 1, you talk about the purpose. Do you actually want, or do you want to include a statement, something along the lines of, the committee has met 5 times to date and received reports from PD, Public Works, Recreation, and the city's auditor and the city's sales tax consultant? Do you want to, basically report out what you've done?
That makes sense to me.
Well, I'm not as married to that because
Okay.
I think this is I hate to say it, but like a warning shot, a high level flag of what you're going to get in March.
Okay,
I think that type of detail is great for that full report.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha.
that's just my opinion. I'm just
Okay.
throwing that out there, guys.
okay.
And I would hope that the council understands what their committees are doing. Partly, maybe that's a little optimistic. But, hopefully they're, on top of it. But maybe,
Okay.
so I would view that as more of a, hey, does the public need to be notified of this as opposed to council?
Gotcha.
But-
And then you had spoke earlier about including some graphics. Do you want any
I
graphics
think-
put into this presentation, or is it just content at this point?
To me, I think it's just content right now because the annual report, we can put the graphs, we have more time, right? The annual report can talk about expenses and revenues but this is preliminary recommendation after a few meetings, pretty much is what we're giving them. And the full report's gonna come as required by the initiative.
The only thing I would say, though, on that is, I think it would be nice, because again, I think when we all sat down here and found out how much money had really gone to pay the deficit, and how much really was going for the Measure X allotment, I think that would be really nice for everybody to see. And you guys are better at that kind of stuff than I would ever be, but to show how, where the money really went, right? Because I don't, again,
So would you, so
Didn't
Keith, are you
realize that.
imagining a table? Are you imagining what, did you provide us a slide the first time? Where it kind of laid out what happened the first, God, I thought there were PowerPoints we got the first time.
I think something simple, we were supposed to get 60 million and 40 million went to pay deficit and
Yes.
20 million went for that.
I
Plain
think
and simple.
it was the first time, because then you made your first cut at, how do I put the money, where do I want to say it was the first meeting. Because you laid it out pretty simply to us, and I think that's why we're all in shock. And then you said, here's what I'm trying to do is, and I don't want to create a separate fund, and I can't remember which one it was. It may have been a couple simple slides that you did, because those were, I think that's what Keith's referring to.
Yeah, I mean, something that just shows we had X, this is how much went to deficit, this is what really went to.
And then we don't have to
Measure X.
recreate the wheel.
Wasn't it something like this, what you were talking about?
Yeah, almost, or even, yeah,
Or
pretty
even
much,
one.
yeah.
Even simpler.
You find one, Sergio, that you think is,
Yeah, I don't think that, yeah, we're looking for what,
Vice Chair Johnson, a line graph, would you recommend a line graph?
I'm kind of drawing, and I think that a pie chart would be real effective on something like this. So, like, for example, if I envision how the April through June of 19, so the one we just finished, a pie chart of where did X go? I mean, it's, I just kind of drew it out real quick here that, you have, 2/3 of it going to the deficit, and then, a little less than a third going, or actually a little bit more than a third going to PD, and then, a little slice to labor savings, labor cuts saved. And then, but I don't know if that would go in this type of a report, or if it'd be in but I think a pie chart of, hey, where did it go?
I think it's simple. I agree with that. Instead of trying to backdoor the entire budget and where Measurex, it's just where's that money going? 100% where that money is going for that quarter.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
That's it. It's
Then
simple. I like that. It's simple.
Yeah,
It's
that's what I'm
simple.
talking, that's what I'm saying, something simple, a pie chart, if
Well, we got,
that's what works.
if it was a quarter of it, right, so it's supposedly $15 million, right? How much of that went to budget deficit? And
Well, it'd be the 10.2,
10.2, and then you said how
I'm
much
saying
went
it's roughly
to,
about 2/3.
so 2/3 of the 10.2?
Yeah. I don't know if that math
So that's
works
like
or
six-
not.
No,
6.5.
2/3 of the 15 is the
2/3 of
10.2.
15.
Okay, so, and then there's 4.8 left,
Yeah, it's
right?
2/3.
and you said some of it went to labor
mean-
savings and some went where
Yeah,
else?
so I mean, you'd have, what, about 10% going to labor savings, what did I write down? Labor cuts
Well,
saved.
that,
Which
so
is-
that would
I
be,
mean,
so that would
it's
be a
horrible
revenue
term.
pie chart, right? The revenue was 15 whatever. X went to deficit, right? X went to public safety and,
But do we
Whatever
want,
left
do we
is
want to
left.
include that in this,
Well, that would be-
the first salvo
well-
across, or is that a, the March report, which, I mean, I think our focus of, and I'm not opposed to doing it in this setting, because I do think that the March report really should be more forward focused.
but the March report's gonna be the first year of tax revenue, right?
It won't be a full year.
It'd be
that point.
3/4, right?
Yeah, the timing of this was
Right, it's a
not
little
thought
off.
out,
It's a little
in my
off.
opinion,
It's a little
align
off.
with, it would be aligned with a calendar year company, but not aligned with a fiscal year city cycle.
Well, Catherine, do you feel that what you've got down there says where the first 15 million went in your staff report?
Yeah.
Okay. But then maybe we don't have to, maybe we don't have to do a pie chart then for the first quarter. And did we, and Keith, did we get our point across that Measurex was spent, well, we say it right there, significant portion of Measurex revenue?
Well, I think it'd just be nice to show that the
Oh,
anticipated income, or the anticipated revenue was 60 million, 40 million went to deficit, and only 20 million was
But-
allocated.
We're only doing
Well,
the
that's
first
forward-looking on 1920.
Right.
One of your tasks is to report backwards and make recommendations for forwards. And what you're talking about is,
A mix of back and forward.
yeah,
Well,
it's,
just to be clear, though, if you look at the ballot measure, what it said was 60 million in revenue, and that's what everybody thought was going to go to the city. As a citizens, that's what I thought when we first sat down here, that's what we all thought. My point on this is to say, hey, look, y'all were told you're getting 60 million, and what you ended up with was 20 million, because 40 million went to the deficit. That's what I think is important about all of this.
Well, I think,
but that's not quite accurate. I think that you had made the decision that you wanted to do this in two pieces.
Right.
The establishing resolution basically envisioned that you would do one annual report to the council.
in March.
And that would be in March, because you would want to provide your budget recommendations to the council in March going forward. So you would be looking backwards at the prior fiscal year to say, this is what happened in the prior fiscal year, and then looking forward, these are our recommendations. But this is kind of a separate deal here, where it sounds like you guys just basically want to, provide an opening statement or a preview, if you will. And so I think that this preview is less about your annual report and more about just making some commentary. Correct me if I'm wrong.
But even with, and I'm trying to accommodate Keith's question, even with just the one quarter, we can show what Keith's wanting to show, right? Because of the 15 million we got approximately.
Yeah.
It divvies itself up to what you're saying, Keith, is that this went to fix an existing hole. A good chunk of the rest went to public safety. And there was a little bit left over for labor savings and other stuff. And a pie chart will show that.
For the Measure X stuff, then my point on all this is to show that we all didn't get what we thought we were gonna get, you know, that's.
Well, that first quarter,
Yeah, but
we didn't get it, and we're gonna be able to do another pie chart or another graph in March to show 3 quarters worth.
No, I fully appreciate that, but I think that right now, again, for the benefit of the citizenry, to show what's happening right now. Because I mean,
I
you
don't
know, it all
know- I
sounds
don't
good,
know
on you know, but.
I don't know how we do that. I mean,
With
Go
the
ahead.
timing of
Right, it's off.
March is off, but, I mean, the way that, from my mind, in that March report, you really have 3 periods that you have to address. You have to address the prior, well, I'll just use coming up in March right now. We have to address the prior 18-19.
so the
You
last
have
quarter.
to address the current budget, okay? It's not done at that year. The current year is
Right,
not
they got
done
one
at
more
that
quarter to
point.
go.
But you're addressing the current budget of, at that point, it'd be 19-20, and then you're speaking into the forward-looking budget of the 2021 budget. In my opinion, in March, we have to hit all 3 of those, and then it's just a rolling cycle to where each year, I mean, obviously, you know, who knows who's going to be in this committee in the future, but, you know, in a rolling cycle, you're able to then just keep moving that forward, because based upon the timing of March, which I think the most important of those 3 is probably that forward-looking
Yes.
portion. But, you know, I think we need to address, at least touch on, you know, pie chart 18-19, where to go. Pie chart of where the budget, you know, the current budget, the one that we're in right now, you know, where it was
And then-
budgeted for.
and I don't-
You know, I'm assuming that you guys will keep with the
Well,
budgets
and I don't
adjust as needed,
I don't
but-
think anybody disagrees. The question is, what pie chart do we put in this piece compared to March, if any?
Do we have to put one though?
Well,
I
I'm
don't
trying
think we
to,
should.
Keith
The
wants to
only
try to
reason
start
why
early
I'm
with
saying
it.
that we
Yeah,
shouldn't is because I feel like with like member Lugo, what he said when we said the last one, it's like this is our starting point. We're like setting the stage. This is what we're doing. I don't think we need to put so much into it. It's like here's the points, and because it's so simple, it needs to be straightforward. I feel like if we put too much into it, it's gonna be like I feel like it'll overwhelm people. And I feel like I like your idea, like 100% in March. I think we should do the before, now, and then what we're looking forward to. Like that's the future. That's just what I think. I mean.
I'm all for, I'm go with consensus, I'm not gonna, my only thing is we're saying, hey, look, a significant amount of money went to other expenditures, okay?
And
If you'd like, you could make that a more specific statement. You could say, 10.2 million of Measure X revenue was used to balance the 18 budget.
But that doesn't, if you're not privy to the information we have, that's really kind of not that meaningful.
Or
18
10.2
million
out of.
what?
Or
No, I.
Two-thirds?
If other members don't want to have a pie chart, that,
Or you could just-
I need a consensus.
you
guys are
could just
better
say
financial people than I am.
2/3 of Measure X revenue was used to balance. That says something.
That would, I think.
okay,
I'm
good
okay with that.
If you,
Right.
Catherine, if you feel that in your report, you're able to defend some of what we recommend, which I think you are.
I hope so.
No, but I think she can because she puts real numbers in her thing. And I think
Okay.
sometimes, yeah.
So maybe that does it right there.
And then parentheses 2/3. Please.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, and then
Like this.
Yes.
Yeah, these-
Gotcha.
Yeah, you forget it, we're dealing with Catherine. These are numbers, people.
Okay.
That's excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
And I think the rest of it, I think, you know,
Okay. Do I have your permission to, I don't see any wavy lines here, so I don't know that we necessarily have any bad grammar here. But if I find,
well, I think you're asking accountants for bad grammar, is that what you're asking?
if I find some bad grammar, without changing the content of the sentence, do I have your permission to
Yes.
add
Make it look pretty?
add a comma or if necessary or whatever?
And you can
Okay.
use color if you want to.
Okay, all right.
But stay within the lines.
Yeah.
And I think it gets, I think all the frustrations and everything that we've heard, I think those two slides pretty much say.
And do you want a slide 4 with this next steps?
Not yet, I think you're right by keeping it simple.
Yeah.
The only thing you would have to do is say full report in March.
Or you could verbalize it.
Verbally.
Yeah.
Or you could verbalize it, yep.
Okay.
Now, here's the next question. So I'm going to prepare this PowerPoint for you.
We need to meet.
What meeting do you want to deliver this PowerPoint at? What city council meeting? And who's going to deliver it on behalf of the committee? Are you going to elect your chair to do it? Are you going to basically decide amongst yourselves, make a motion and elect somebody to deliver this? 2 people to deliver it, to kind of both go up to the podium? We need to work out those logistics.
So not a receiving file.
Right, you want,
Right.
I got it, you want regular business.
It'll be regular business. Well, it could go on. See, the other thing is it could go on consent calendar and someone could pull it and then we would discuss it anyway, so it can be regular business. Because I think Measurex is such an important part of the city going forward that it probably needs to be regular business.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be a long discussion, but
So any thoughts as to which council meeting? Do you want to try for the
Well,
January?
we have to do one in
21st?
March, right? What dates are the ones in March? The council meetings in March? Because that's when we're gonna have to
The March
give you
one is
direct-
where your full report is.
Right, that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay, gotcha.
It's the first and third, what is it,
Yeah,
first and third Tuesday?
so it's,
Wow.
March 3rd and March 17th.
So technically, per the language, it says during our March meeting, which would be, then it would be presented in April.
Well, actually, if our March meeting's early in the month, we could present
do it
at
at the-
council
yes.
March 17th, right?
So, okay, let's,
But that's the full
Do we
report.
have a
But
I think
this
we
is
have
the
a
preliminary
pre-scheduled
report.
date for.
yeah, you have a pre-scheduled date, and it is March 11th.
So it'd be a week before the council meeting.
Yep, but then you don't have time to make the agenda packet.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, it would give you.
So first
less
things
than a
first, so
day.
this one has to be, we have to get this on in January, so probably end of January, the last meeting in January?
Yeah, because the first meeting of January has been canceled.
I see.
So if you want to take this to the council, your next opportunity is going to be January 21st.
As far as availability goes, I should be here, meaning to say I should be in town.
Okay?
And regardless of who goes up and presents this, I plan to show up to support
I don't know if I'm gonna.
anybody that on this committee.
For me personally, I'm impressed with member Leo's ability to
To
speak.
dance on my feet, that's the problem, man. I should be in town. I'm happy to do it if you guys want me to do it.
Yeah, I would be more than happy to have you do it.
But I will be there to show
Moral
support also
appreciate it.
and
Yeah.
hold your briefcase.
Don't need a briefcase, I'm gonna have 3 slides, that's all.
You can give them the financial lingo, man.
Okay, so
bring a
did
fan.
somebody make a motion and,
I motion that Member Leo presents.
okay,
Second.
okay,
Say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
okay.
No.
Sorry.
Sorry. Okay, I was gonna say, am I picking? Okay. And,
Yeah, I'm fine going up there with him. but
I would
think
also suggest we send a member, Tim, here with them, as he's a financial lingo guy, so I think that might be a good thing.
okay,
If
so you're making a motion for Member Johnson to assist?
That's correct.
To stand next to, yes,
Second.
as we go through this.
Okay, you got a second?
Ready to hold my hand.
Okay. And do you want to call for that vote, your motion and your second?
Yes, I'd like to call for a vote on that.
Aye.
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 It's on the 21st, is that right?
Yep, January 21st. Okay, so one last time, I'm giving you an off-ramp here. Can we take just a 5-minute pause here and have you independently reread this and make sure that you are all comfortable, because we live and work in this political environment. And you want to make sure that we are, how should I say, create the most positive working relationship that we can in your advisory role to the city council. I want you as a committee to be successful.
Sure.
And I want you to have a positive impact on, going forward. So I just want you to make absolute sure that you are happy with these statements. I'll just be blunt, that you don't feel like you're, burning any bridges or, setting up any adversarial relationships or anything like that. So I would encourage you to just take a pause, read it, make sure this is really, this is what you want to, where you want to go.
Are you able to comment from this is obviously our report.
Right.
Do you have concerns that this is too harsh of language? Is this too
Inflammatory, is that what you're saying?
non-political? Or, what do you have concerns?
Half of that stuff up there you've probably told them.
Oh, I have, yeah.
But it's different coming
Yeah.
from in a public
Hey, well,
forum too.
well, no, no,
And you have to be very careful with the way that you word things. I mean, I've been working in this environment
Sure.
for a long time, and you are
Understood.
much more successful if you learn how to,
Understood. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think your content is fine. A lot of it is fact-based statement, and that's good. That's always a good place to be in this environment. To your, one of your notions, Member Leo, you had mentioned about thanking the citizens for, and I know that would be part of your annual report, but you may want to consider a quick statement on slide 1 that says, each committee member feels a sense of duty, something like, the committee thanks the city council for giving them the opportunity to serve.
I was gonna use that in my verbal stuff, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I mean, verbally, I was gonna say, we're all,
okay.
we're happy to serve, and, because that's just generally, thank you for letting me serve. You always say, thank you, or thank you for giving me the opportunity to comment. However, here we go.
And then what about answering the obvious question of why are you bringing this to us now?
We are bringing this to you now because in just a few meetings, we've uncovered some things that we wanted to let you know about prior to us providing you a full report in March.
Okay.
And that's pretty, what we've been able to glean from our meetings. This is what we've gleaned. We want to let you know. We didn't want to bring you any surprises in March.
Do you think but by that statement though, we're implying that they don't know this?
I would, my feeling is there's so much going on that sometimes the basic block and tackle stuff, I mean, these folks live it. Sometimes it's in one ear out the other. They're focused on right now, if you were to look at the council and the arguments that they're having over homelessness and some of the other things are just massive things. They think the budget's rolling along just fine. They don't look at it all the time like that. They'll ask Catherine some questions from the dais, but they think hey, we got tax money, budget's okay, let's keep going, and people are here to ask for more money. I think when I listen to the council meeting, that's what most of it's about.
I think ministerially, we may need to ask permission of the mayor or the city manager or somebody. Who actually holds the power to set the agenda here at the city? I think it's the city manager.
City manager, and then there's a certain
Yeah.
time for the 85A and 85B
I
on
was
Fridays.
looking too, if this
Yeah.
would fall under board commission committees 13, where all the people are, where all the folks are appointed to boards. Obviously, that's not what you're doing here, what
Yeah.
you're doing, and then there's
Yeah.
the committee reports.
Those are council committees, right?
Yeah,
Made up of
or the
council members.
reports, 65A stuff. The 85As are more, the city
Right.
council indicates, hey, we're not, like, provide staff direction, city manager direction
Right.
to do X, Y, and
Well,
Z.
you guys
Okay.
will figure it out.
How about this?
I mean, it goes somewhere in there.
Here's what I would like to do. So we've received your direction, you've crafted your statements. I would like to take this draft, these
Sure.
statements, because they're not draft anymore.
Right.
You've basically finalized them, except for maybe a period or a comma is what I may find. Is to take these statements to the city manager and basically make sure that she is supportive of you bringing this forward as a preliminary, just a preliminary heads up to the city council on January 21st. She works the closest with the city council members out of all of the city. And so if she sees a great problem with this, maybe she's thinking of something that I can't think of, and she sees some terrible, no, stop, you don't want to do this for these reasons, then what I would promise to do is, and I could do this very quickly, like say in the next couple of business days, is to get back to the committee and poll you for some January meeting dates so that we can reconvene with the city manager's advice, and then you can make a decision and go from there. How does that sound? That way it kind of I know that you guys have a desire to do this. I just want to make sure that we're not the city manager is supportive of it. I think it would be good if you had the city manager's support before going to council. And she's a very reasonable person.
And I think our timing is fine with that, because, I mean, we're shooting for end of January.
Right,
And-
January 21st,
and,
yeah.
I mean, to where if this has to get pushed into February, I don't think that's a.
Okay.
If it gets pushed into February, then I would just roll it in, I would roll it into the March annual,
Oh, okay.
annual report at that
Okay.
point.
Well, but remember, the March annual report is, we're supposed to be meeting in March to go over the annual report, which means that that's
We
actually
gotta do both.
presented either at
Well,
the
the good
very
thing
end of
is
March
this-
or in the.
Either way, I think either way, these are either preliminary slides that go in February, or they're the early slides of the March structure, the annual report.
Yep.
Because I think that, and I could be wrong, but I think the city manager is going to say, I think I try to tell them, the city council, this all the time, and sometimes they listen and sometimes they don't. Because I haven't heard, Catherine, you say anything much different than what we've said. And your concerns about expenses exceeding revenues, the city manager at the chamber meeting said the same thing. She said things start to go like this after another year. So it's nothing's new.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that some of the things that we're recommending are basic accounting principles, basic things that for whatever reason, political reasons mostly, they choose to veer from. And we're trying to remind them, do not veer from them, please.
Okay.
And I think, to me, that's the easiest thing. And so,
Yeah, I think what you've got here is good. I really do. I just want to, have the out that if for some reason I take this to the city manager and she's like, whoa, wait a second here, and she's got some serious concerns with it, I think that I would advise you to trust her intuition and meet again in January to reconvene with her advice. How does that sound?
I agree with that.
I'm fine with that.
You're fine with that?
Keith has his concern.
I'm not totally fine with it, but I'll agree
Okay.
with the rest of the committee.
So he's only heard from two of us.
Well, I just, don't like the idea that this becomes a political committee. Again, I'm a citizen advocate, and I think that's my role. I do not believe that I need to be concerned about the feelings of the council. I hate to put it that way, because too much of what I've seen going on here is about the concerns of the council and what they want to do. We're in this boat because of what they didn't do in the first place. So my concern is I don't want to politicize this committee.
Okay.
I want to keep it, that's just my opinion, that's my concern. I'm a citizen advocate, I'm a citizen of the city. I'm not a politician, don't have any intent of becoming a politician. So that is my only concern, that this becomes politicized.
Yeah, and I don't want it to become politicized for you either. I just want you guys to be able to provide your sound advice to the city council from, from the citizen perspective and be very successful.
Well, I think I could add my 2 cents, and along with Commissioner Abigail. But I will say this, that when you were discussing this and you started to ask us to carefully consider what we're going to present, I think the measuring stick that I held and I was comfortable with is, if any resident in the city were to look at this, would I be okay with them looking at it, less the city council looking at that?
Okay.
I have no political affiliation, and to council member Solorio's, I'm not sure what the word is, but to his benefit, I think the fact that I came there and told him I have no interest in any politics and I have no affiliation with anybody in the council member, and he still chose for me to be here, I applaud him for that, because I really have, I know nobody here has seen me before. There's a reason behind that, because I've never wanted to be part of these things, but I volunteered knowing full well that this measure is very important to the citizens. And when I look at the statement, I think the statement will hold the test of time.
Okay.
So I think the nicest way to put it is, let the city manager know. I mean, if you're going to talk to her, let her know we're pretty hell-bent on going forward with what we got.
Yeah, and
So
I will
unless
do
it's going to
that.
blow up, then
Yeah, and
we're
I
gonna
will
go
do
ahead.
that.
And from my perspective, this is, when I look at it, we're stating the obvious. I think we're stating the obvious and saying, hey, look, before you jump down the next rabbit hole that you're going to jump down, think about what we said to you. The voters were kind enough to give you money. Please be mindful of their money and what they want it spent on. And I think Keith's kind of expressing it in that way. He's like, hey, I'm here to advocate for my neighbors. I'm not here to advocate for anybody else. I'm here to make sure the money gets spent how we thought it was going to get spent. And I think we should be okay. I mean, I think I can't imagine she's going to say it's on fire. They may not like what we say, but half the time they don't like what you say, right? So it's not, I mean, it is what it is, and I think we should, it's out there. I mean, every time I see a grand jury report and I see how upset the county gets, well, obviously you're doing something you're not supposed to be doing, or they found a hole in your service. It is what it is, and we're here to oversee the money, and just like the Measure M has an oversight commission, so be it. But if you feel comfortable, if you feel you need to go to her, I don't have an issue with it. But I'm kind of in Keith's camp and Commissioner Lugo's camp.
I agree. I mean, if you take it to her as a heads up, as a courtesy, I'm all for it. But if it, like I say, if it becomes
right,
if she wants to influence our decision, I'm opposed to that.
Yeah.
It's that simple. Thank you.
But I mean, I think administratively, though, she controls the agenda.
That's right.
Yeah, so she's going to
and
see
so
it
that-
anyway.
Right. So I mean, I think that no, I don't think anyone on this committee wants to have this politicized. But I mean, she controls the agenda, and to where I would prefer, instead of her just saying, we're not going to, you guys are supposed to present in March or April, your annual. That's what you've been charged with. Any one of us could go there and speak as an individual anytime we wanted to, but I would prefer it to be as part of the process, as opposed to the exception. And and if she has hopefully she would, if she doesn't think that this is the right thing, she can come and advise us to why it wouldn't be. And hopefully that advice is not because of political, reasons, that it's like, hey, you guys, just don't, here are the couple of things that you need to consider.
That's a fair statement, I agree.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So do you need a motion from us, or we covered everything?
No, we have our
Okay.
direction from you. We're good.
All right.
Okay.
Is that it? We'll adjourn, right?
No,
Motion to adjourn?
no. And then staff comments, and I have a few.
Okay.
We don't have any public,
Nope,
No.
no public
no
comments.
public comments
Waited it
today?
all out. Sleep.
Staff member comments.
Okay, I have just a couple here. So our new council member, Becerra, he's been provided with a list of all the committees that he needs to make appointments to, which obviously includes this one, so he is fully aware of it. On the December 17th agenda, he's got some nominations on there for the Planning Commission and ETAC. So we expect that at some point he'll come up with an oversight committee,
Okay.
but it just hasn't happened yet. You had mentioned that the next in line that you wanted to see, based on my notes from your previous meetings, was a combination of planning and building and community development at your next meeting. And so right now, you are adjourning to your March 11th meeting, and so I would expect that we would have both planning and building and CDA on that agenda. Does that sound correct to the committee? And then I just wanted to point out, even though I provide you with the monthly updates by email of our revenue, for 6 months of revenue, it just forget about the fiscal years, that some is in this year, some is in that year, some of it's late, this and that. The bottom line is 6 cash payments that we've received have totaled $29,545,000 to date. So just a hair shy of the 30 million. But again, we know that some of the corrections are trickling in. So, I still feel very good about our $60 million estimate. And then the last thing that I wanted to share with you was we just closed on our gas tax refunding bonds. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because our interest savings on that, it's kind of like refinancing your mortgage, is $940,000, an average of $940,000 a year. That money can be used for fixing streets going forward.
Does that money, when you refinance the bonds, does it specifically go back to the general fund, or does it go?
No, this is gas tax money.
It's gas tax money can
And
only
gas
be used
tax
on
money
roads.
can
Okay.
only be used on roadway maintenance, which
Excellent.
includes the full roadway, to be fair, pavement, sidewalks.
It's okay.
Medians, traffic signals, the whole deal, the roadway is all, fair game for gas tax money. But my point is, almost $1 million is getting freed up. And obviously, you all remember the presentation that William made, where he
That's
said
good.
that he needed some money, and there it is.
That's
So those
good.
are all my comments.
Committee member comments. Any final passing thoughts?
None for me.
None for me.
None for me.
I'm just super appreciative of Catherine responding so timely to all, to my questions and all those types of things, and the information that you're providing to us. I think it's invaluable, and I really appreciate the time that you put into working with us.
Thanks.
I would second that, and again, let's keep this committee for the public and not for the politicians. Thank you.
So are you adjourning the meeting?
Yes, sorry. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks for all showing up.
Thank you.
Thank you.